Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time to tape a VR download, and just me here for now. Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time for VR download. I'm here early, trying to catch up on the month of July as David gets ready to join us in the studio here in a few minutes. How is everyone out there? Hello, Not Suspicious and Arlen. I see you're out here early. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to be depending on you to help catch me up on the month here while we wait for David to join. Let's see if I get my remote desktop up here. Yeah, I had the Batman playing a second ago over here in a window, but I decided that I shouldn't have a movie playing while I'm in the studio with all of you. That was a little too distracting. Yeah, I see the. Let's see. That's funny. Here's me not looking at my hand. I'm gonna make the same gesture here. So I'm making the Spock gesture, and now I'm gonna look at my hand. All right. All right. I'm not looking at my hand. It's closed. It's a closed hand here. Now I'm going to turn it into, oh, you could see it change a little bit. So it recognizes change there, but it doesn't know how much I change. And now I'm doing Spock fingers over there with my hand, but I'm not actually letting the Quest look at it. Now I'm looking at it. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, James says it's been a hot year. Yeah, not suspicious. Lots to discuss today. We have a quick, set of, I think, 7 subjects. I have to get that into my notes here while I'm chatting with you all informally. So yeah, we're getting started at the top of the hour here with David when he gets in here. But I thought I'd try to catch up a little bit on what's happening in July until he gets up here. This is going to confuse the timestamps, though, David. We're going to have to figure out how to efficiently do the timestamps once he's back in here. So how are you all doing out there? I see Rudy out there, Onakazi. Of course, when I assume you're doing it at your normal time. Yeah, we got in here early. Yeah, James and I did a cool experiment. We got Vision, we got the latest beta running on our headsets, and we shared a window in my office. So I had a chromatic in my hand, Mod Retro Chromatic. I can't remember which cartridge I had. James, remind me which cartridge I had in the chromatic when we tested this. But I put the chromatic cartridge in. I had a video output from the chromatic to my headset, and using the latest system, I just shared my window with him. James grabbed my window and moved it around the room, and it was shared for us both pretty perfectly. Really fantastic experiment for us to do. Really enjoyed that over the July. Yeah, I think it was Tetris is what James is saying. And it was the share nearby feature coming in the latest beta of Vision OS. So took us a while to get in the same location with a pair of Vision Pros to pull that off. I'll keep an eye on the comments here for questions or any questions as you all file in for our official show here starting in about 25 minutes. But I will first get my notes ready for today, and then I'll go through the month of July over here on UploadVR.com as I get caught up on everything David and team have been writing as I've been off. I'd love to see where everyone is watching from. If you're catching up today, feel free to skip this section of the show to get forward to when David is part of the show and we do our official show at the top of the hour. So let's see here. Gotta refresh these. Yeah, it took us a while to get the Vision OS thing going because I wasn't on the latest beta. I had to install the latest beta on the headset in order for us to share our window between us. Let me know what you've been doing this summer. I'd love to hear what movies you've been watching, what games you've been playing in VR, what places you've been going in VR. as I just get set up here for our official show. Still got that top fans thing going on in our chat, and I don't know if it's showing me all the comments at this point. I'm trying to click on it. James, you are the leader of today's chat, so you'll have to represent everyone else's perspectives, I guess, based on what it's telling me. All right. So I spent some of my time in Vision Pro, some of my time in Quest headsets. I set up a Quest 3S Xbox Edition over my break here. I also set up a Quest 2. Set up the permission settings on the Quest 2 for a kid. That's the first time I've officially set that up with the latest features from Meta for doing that. Took quite a big chunk of time to get that all set up. All right, getting our notes. Played some Jigsaw Night over my break. That was cool. I had Steve Lucas, the creator of Jigsaw Night, join a co-location session with my kid. We were the three of us in 3 quests. My kid in my living room, me there, and then Steve all the way, I think, across the country, joining us, and sent me a funny video after our thing of our whole puzzling session. But it was wildly cool. The effect of having my kid hold his whole puzzle and move it around the room in front of him, and like he was standing at one point, and then he, while holding the puzzle, spun around and sat down while holding it. And that's like, oh, you don't remember what it was like to change. You have to like redo your whole setup because you need to change from room scale to seated play, and he's just instantly doing that in mixed reality. It was pretty cool to watch. Hey, Nick. I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing? Brutal said they just finished the new RoboCop DLC, and they're playing, wow, on a lot on the UEVR injector. Yeah, the UEVR injector has been a summer staple, I think, for a lot of people. Can you imagine, finishing school and trying to figure out what you're doing all summer, and finding this list of games that you could investigate all summer long, of games you could explore in your VR headset sitting over there in the corner? Yeah. I like to imagine that a lot of people are doing that in very large numbers, and the numbers escape tracking, right? Like it's hard to know people are doing that. So I like the idea that a lot of people are out there doing that in numbers. Hello, Parmesan. Thank you for welcoming me back. It's great to be back. All right, I've got my notes set up. I'm going to go back to the UploadVR homepage here. We've got about 20 minutes before we should expect David to be with us. How is it with David as the sole voice out here over the month? Let us know how much you love that. And as I said at the top of the show, if you're just joining us, feel free to skip all this and get to the top of the show when David joins us for the official, new news run through. All right. Wow, that's a lot of news for the month of June. All right. David, with the confusion at the heart of Google's Android XR branding at the start of the month. Questcraft 6.0 had some improvements for Pico. Well, major improvements overall, and then also Pico support. Yeah, and then there's Meta prioritizing an ultralight headset with puck for 2026 over a traditional Quest 4. It's a big one. Puzzling Places got a PCVR demo. I saw that Unreal Engine is winning out over there for Puzzling Places. Would love to hear from the Puzzling Places devs. They've been doing magical work in VR over the years to give you 3D models of places that you can piece together. If you're unfamiliar with that game, definitely go give it a look. And there's a deep DLC repository there of places you can piece together and explore. I can't wait to see how far they take that platform in the coming years. Jigsaw Night is the one that has captured my attention quite recently because of how it uses all the latest meta platform tools, all the mixed reality. It's got live camera in there. It's got an easy switch for mixed reality and VR mode and co-location, all those features. And then it even had meta shared spatial anchors. And I couldn't get those to work. That was the one thing I'll bring up before, so of all the settings that I dealt with in the per app permissions that I was giving my kid, I was trying to give permission to enable it. What does Meta call it now? Enhanced spatial services for Jigsaw Night for my kid, and I kept clicking the button. It wouldn't take. And eventually I had to co-locate us in the right location. I had to manually take this table that was in our living room and rotate it. There's two types of handles on this little table. One type of handle moves things in one direction and one handle moves things in another direction. And so I had to find the two handles here, move it around, got us located, and then I could turn his avatar off and all of the content was left perfectly co-located between our two headsets, and then we had the third person join us, and it was fantastic. But the shared spatial anchors that you'll see a couple episodes back, I talked about, and I couldn't get that to work. I couldn't get the permission, for my kid's headset to share their Bluetooth permissions with others. I don't know. Anyways, yeah. Oh, Parmesan's asking me what I did on vacation. So I went to Washington, D.C., went to Virginia for a little bit, got to see the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, went to a crazy building in Washington, D.C. that I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. It was a mansion or a museum, whatever it was. It was like interconnected buildings in Washington, D.C., and I'm not going to name it because I don't want to do free advertising for it. But it's like a thrift shop built into a mansion with hidden doors behind every room. So like each room is hidden behind a doorway in this interconnected mansion, and every single room is stacked with stuff to buy, and it's all essentially junk, right? The stuff you find at a thrift shop. But like one person's junk is another person's treasure, right? You go to one room and it's like all Batman themed objects. You go to another room, it's all James Bond themed objects. And so it had the feel of a thrift shop, yet the vibe of a museum or mansion, because they're all fully furnished rooms that you're exploring, and they're just chalk floor to ceiling full of stuff that you can bring to the front and say, I want to buy this piece of thing that was associated with this random room I found on floor 3 of this mansion. It was a weird experience, to say the least. And I kept thinking about, like, is this, like, did VR do this to this space? Did we crunch down physical reality to, like, now all we got is mansions turned into thrift shops? Like, that was my thought as I was exploring that. I got some videos on my Ray-Ban glasses of this weird location and the hidden doors behind everything. I'd be curious if anyone in our comments knows of this Washington, D.C. tourist trap I saw. But yeah, the Washington Washington Monument, Lincoln Memorial was cool. Getting to, I guess there was also the World War II Memorial and Vietnam Memorial. Walked through those. Got to see the spot over near the Lincoln Memorial where what the new Captain America ran by the old Captain America and says "on your left" in those scenes. Yeah. So then went to Virginia and got to look at Colonial Williamsburg. And Colonial Williamsburg, right? If you're anything like me, you see VR everywhere you go. Colonial Williamsburg is a really neat location that shows the founding places of the United States, where the first colonies were for the settlers coming over from Europe to the United States. And they've got basically the streets that are lined up around the time of the Revolution of the United States, and history and reenactments going on all the time around there. And they've got it structured such that you can buy a certain ticket to just go through the area, or a certain ticket to go inside and interact with reenactors who are actually inside all the buildings. And so there is an original printing press there, and you go inside and learn about the original printing press they've got with a person who's actually printing paper right in front of you. They've got the ink, they've got the press going, and they're actually making pages right in front of you as you do it. And you can walk these streets, and it's like that all through town. The cobbler and all the different, I think it's a joiner for different wood makings. And the whole time I'm thinking, how much more amazing would this place be if I could switch between, taking the headset off, or maybe it's goggles hanging on my neck, right? You've got these people that could be wearing audio guides, and that's great. You've got an audio guide. I want a video guide, and I want to see the smoke billowing from these buildings as it did on, I want to see Paul Revere do his ride. I want to see these things happening physically around me. And it feels like you could get there with a really cool mixed reality system that takes these physical reenactors and then gives them actual digital props that enhance what they're telling you. So imagine these reenactors knowing what the digital stuff around them is doing that enhances the layer of physical stuff that they've got. So I don't remember if anyone had any fires going in any of the fireplaces, but that's an easy digital effect you can imagine being layered on by a mixed reality headset that's just background to everything else that you're doing in physical reality with a physical reenactor right in front of you. You can imagine audio cues like horses clomping by, because they had actual horses in this area where people could take them by. But you can imagine traffic being quite a bit more robust back in the 1700s with horses going by rather than just the one horse carriage that goes by on a tour. Imagine simulating 4 or 5 horse carriages going by over the course of a 30-minute session where you're learning how a printing press works. You could layer in a whole bunch of elements. Yeah, crispy. Yeah, you are. You walked into it. We've got 10 minutes here until David joins, so you get more fever dreams until I'm kept to task. And yeah, that's what Colonial Williamsburg brought to mind. How amazing it would be if you could enhance or see reenactments with the physical surroundings. Yeah, really, really cool to go back there. I also went to the Air and Space Museum, and I got to make this recommendation here. There are 2 Air and Space Museums in Washington. There's an extension where they have the Space Shuttle Discovery, the what was its name? One of the planes that dropped a nuclear bomb in World War II. Can't think of its name offhand. Someone in the comments will mention it. They had reconnaissance vessels. Just the entire history of aircrafts are in this multi-hangar system at the extension near Washington, D.C. And you get a space shuttle, you get a World War II plane that was instrumental in ending that conflict. And then all of this is right around you. And in that facility, if you walk around near the Space Shuttle Discovery, they have a VR headset from the year 1985. One of the first VR headsets designed by people at NASA. I don't have that photo to pull up right now, but I think I put it out there on my Blue Sky. If you want to check it out. But that was fantastic. Yeah, Crispy, I'm just talking about what I've been up to this summer, and I was catching up on July when you all distracted me with your comments. I was trying to catch up on the news. I want to depend on you guys to catch me up. David and I are going to get started here in about 8 minutes covering the latest news. But I wanted to catch up on what was happening in what happened in July. And I started off with June here, just looking back on June before I got to July. And then people asked me what I was doing this summer. Yeah, the Enola Gay. Yeah, that was at the extension facility for the Air and Space Museum. Then we went to the actual Space Museum that's like amongst the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. That's amongst the whole set of facilities in Washington, D.C., in between the Capitol and the White House. That was actually a big disappointment right now because they've got half of the museum set up to open like a new exhibit on the history of flight. So there's a lunar lander there, but it was behind a wall. We couldn't go see it. And then that wall was basically half of the entire museum. So it was a big disappointment to go see the lunar lander and whatever information on the future of flight is all closed as of last month in Washington, D.C. And then we got to see a whole bunch of other things at the extension. The extension was amazing. So if you're going to Washington, D.C. anytime, you can see a VR headset from 1985 behind glass, and then check out the Enola Gay, the Spatial Discovery, and goodness, there's just a whole list of additional aircraft there. So I got to recommend that. And all right, so let's scroll through June here real quick. Get us to July, yeah. So we're talking about Celeste is being the name of the HUD glasses, along with the EMG wristband. Seeing a lot of those photos floating around. Heard some things about Meta testing that quite a bit. And I can't wait to see what that looks like. The X Arcade had its haptics kit announced. I have been messing with the X Arcade. Really hard to review the X Arcade. That's a really interesting product where it's got all the controls for a classic arcade system. But I can't figure out what device I want to hook it up to. Do I want to hook it up directly to a Quest, my Steam Deck, my iPad, my Mac? Because it's a really, like the trackball, you can make it a mouse, but ultimately I think the best device that the X Arcade works with is a Steam Deck. And that's wild. Like you got to get a hub for your Steam Deck and then hook this thing up to the Steam Deck, but then you've got full menu control of the Steam Deck. Really fantastic. Quest 3S was down to $250 in July over at Amazon. Yeah, of course. I got my Quest 3S Xbox Edition, which I didn't want to unbox, but I decided to. A little bit frustrating. I tried to actually link the black Xbox controllers, the black Quest 3S touch controllers with a different headset, and it only wanted to pair with the Xbox Edition. Now, I don't know if that was like a first time only thing. It only wanted to pair the black controllers with the black headset on first connection, and then maybe I can reconnect those controllers to another headset. But ultimately, I wanted to use those controllers with my Quest 3, which is, just because it's got better optics. And it was like both the controller, the Xbox controller that comes with the 3S, and the controllers seem to be synced to the headset, at least on first connection. Snorlax is a time traveler. Yeah, like I said earlier, catch up. Go ahead and skip to when David joins here. This is the kind of educational use case Carl Sagan talked about wanting to see VR get used for in the book Pale Blue Dot. Yeah, I have lots of thoughts on that, and lots of if you continue on, if you can get a school room class full of students all sharing the same 2D screen, and you have a teacher able to kind of like look in on what the student is seeing, any one of those 20 or 30 students, and see what they're seeing at any time. You have a VR classroom, you have a mixed reality classroom, but we have, Not Suspicious out there is well aware in their software designs of the reasons why what I just described are really, really hard to pull off. Um, Lots of people, yeah, people are saying that they see people move to flat. It's a very tricky thing to think about flat to VR and what flat to VR has done to this market. And I just started talking about UEVR a little while ago. Um, why would You see re-releases of games on Chromatic? You see they launched with Tetris, and I think I just got a re-release of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. It's not called Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Sabrina Zapped or something. But re-releases of classic games, I think, is on the menu. Extend that over to VR, and like, do people really want to buy? They already did that, right? They already did what, Fallout and Skyrim VR, and they re-released those games. But ultimately, people want to take their old game with 500 mods and try that thing with VR. And I don't know. That's the model. Should have David here any second. Let's return home. Every year, the news kind of picks up when we get to August and September. We've got MetaConnect coming soon. And then you've got the big Christmas push, which is kind of the framing that's going to frame the last bit of our conversation here with David in a little bit. What are we looking at for the fall this year? Arlen is saying that either in Pale Blue Dot or the Demon Haunted World, Carl Sagan talked about using VR for education. Yeah, there's something called the Navigators program I think I heard about at a local group, and it's like a non-denominational Boy Scouts. And I keep thinking about the idea of like all those various Boy Scout tasks you would have. Like, imagine doing a Pinewood Derby, but you actually model the car in VR and get it, I don't know, machine milled to your specifications from what you've modeled in VR. And again, I think I described it earlier. Not Suspicious. Go check out Not Suspicious's games. There's a really interesting. You'll have to remind me what the name is of your educational app. Feel free to name it in the comments. That they built with a really, really cool it was a table of elements game where you could show information over on a 2D screen over there, and it really feels like every educational app needs to have like a live camera that lets you talk to the teacher at any time, as well as this 2D panel that a teacher can kind of like show you information on inside your headset. I don't know. We should have David here any minute, but it was remarkable with what I've got right now. I've got a USB-C cable plugged into this headset, which is a Quest 3, and it's bringing me HDMI signal from my network. And I could take that USB-C cable out of this headset, plug it into a Vision Pro, and be good to go watching the same movie on the Vision Pro that I'm watching here. And I don't know, classrooms need that capability, whole organizations need that capability, and that's just the beginning of how we need to share our stuff with each other. Tablecraft is the game from Not Suspicious. David has just popped in here, so let's get on with our normal show here. David, thank you for opening this up early for me. Thank you for running everything smoothly with Henry Stockdale and Don Hopper over the month of July. I was just trying to catch up over on the heavy month of news over there, and I could barely do it because everyone kept distracting me. They wanted to know how my summer was going. And yeah, I had a little fever dream there. I explained the way I. Do you have that experience, David? Do you go off on vacation and you're still haunted by VR and thoughts of VR when you're on vacation?
Yeah, so firstly, it's great to see you back. Great to be back to our normal duo format show. As I was speaking about in last week's episode, there actually was a mixed reality app I tried on vacation that I really enjoyed, the putting one that lets you use your real putter and golf ball. And as I'm sure you've been talking about, I haven't been tuning into the show, so you'll have to tell me what's going on so far. But I'm sure you'll be talking about. There is a difference when you take some time off and you're trying things purely because you personally directly want to in that moment versus something that you think needs to be covered.
Yeah, you nailed it. I don't need to recap for you, but I was just talking about video in, and that's exactly what it was. I kind of went on a quest over this month of like, I need to have everything around me in my headset, and I don't care what headset it is. I I just need it in my headset in order to use the headset on a regular basis. And that's what illuminated over this month was just how many walls are between us and our existing content, not to mention the people around us. So yeah, I got into that over my little fever dream. And again, for people that are just joining us, this is our normal show, so feel free to uh, skip past the first half hour of this recording and time travel right up to present. And again, if you're joining us now at our normal broadcast time and having to catch up to us, thank you to our travelers. David, I don't have the list. I didn't copy it if we have any new patrons that joined us. So do you have the list of patrons over there by chance? I have the old one.
I don't have it in front of me, but we can just go to the About page on UploadVR.com and you'll see the full list there. So I don't know, you can bring that up there.
Yeah, give me 1 minute to pull that up.
Yeah, so if anyone's just joining us or if you joined us recently, Ian is back from his kind of month-long hiatus. So for the first half an hour of this show, if you're wondering why did it start half an hour early, Ian's just been kind of recapping with the audience and talking about some of the things he tried and getting back up to speed live. But now, once Ian brings up this list of our valued Upload VR patrons, we'll start our regular show as we normally would at this time.
Yeah, so let's just start from the top here with my normal thing. Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time here for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney from London in the UploadVR studios as we discuss the next steps in personal computing. We're in Quest 3 headsets today with last generation meta avatars. We're using built-in microphones with hand tracking, and I got tablets in front of us that show us notes and comments so we can interact with our audience when we're live. We've got everyone all over the world. We love to see where you're watching us from. And if you're time traveling, thank you for tuning in and catching up to us on audio podcast form or in a different place or time. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do on UploadVR.com. In case this is your first time, you can become a paying member at UploadVR.com to support our work directly. We thank our patrons by name here on this podcast, and we list them on our website. So I pulled that up here in VR. It's XR Developer News, Podum, the developer of Smash Drums, Holodent, Mike Monzano, Justin Corcoran at Phosphor Studios, Richard Meller, Parmesan, Qubits, Steve Lucas, and David Wyatt. Thank you all sincerely for the support of the work that we do. David, what do we have today?
Yeah, so we have 7 topics we're going to be discussing today. Firstly, we will talk about Premier League Player airing a live VR recreation of a football match next week. So we always talk on this show about the different ways in which you could watch sports in a headset. This is yet another new way, and I'm sure people will have mixed thoughts on the exact implementation there. Next, we'll talk about the editorial I wrote about Quest's new boundary system and its kind of dangerous safety regression. By new, I'm talking about the one they rolled out throughout this year. It's not something that's just happened, this week or last, but it was one of those very gradual rollouts, and it's something that I've had a lot of people contact me about in regards to the obvious safety issues. So we'll dig into that. Then we'll talk about 2 Quest Horizon OS software updates. Firstly, V79 of Quest's Horizon OS and how it matches the color temperature of 2D windows to your real environment's ambient lighting. A little kind of polishing touch there. Then we'll talk about meta avatars, getting deeper body and face customization, as well as in the US and Canada, AI outfit assist. So that's for the regular kind of cartoony avatars, the successor to the ones we're using here. Then we will talk about some very different meta avatars, Meta's research into codec avatars. Specifically, the news here is that they now support changeable hairstyles, but we'll dig into some of the technical details and some of the big changes that have actually happened to meta codec avatars over the past year that we haven't really gone into enough detail on. So I recommend reading that article where we recap, and then we will also obviously be discussing it here, because the question I'm sure everyone has is, when are these things going to actually ship? How will they ship? Will they be the same quality in research? And, we have hints at the answers to a lot of those questions in our discussion and article. Then we will talk about another area of research, Meta and Stanford's thin holographic display, which brings VR glasses closer to reality. What do I mean by that? I mean a VR system that is no more cumbersome than a heavy pair of regular eyeglasses, the kind of dream form factor for VR. I'm not just talking about, big screen beyond level size. I'm talking about going half or a third of the weight and size of that. Truly far off stuff, let's be clear. We're not talking about something that's going to ship anytime soon, but the research towards that eventual dream of a VR display system that's just 3 millimeters thick. Finally, we will have our main discussion, Meta's Q2 2025 earnings call, where we learned that Ray-Ban Meta sales are skyrocketing while Quest sales are down again for the second quarter in a row. The kind of positive aspect there is that Quest retention continues to increase. So we're still in this weird situation that's kind of the opposite of the Quest 2 era, where retention is going up, but actual new headset hardware sales are going down. We will discuss the wider context of that, how this might change Meta's plans and priorities, what it means for the industry as a whole, and everything else related to that. I'm sure there'll be some very strong opinions there in an aspect, a piece of news that is very important to our industry.
Yep, that's a big one, and I think it'll be the biggest portion of discussion there. So I'm going to want us to move through our subjects as quickly as I can. Looking over the comments, I saw the question about the visor. We don't have any plans to talk about the visor, but I do recommend you Google our most recent coverage of visor. David and I both have put visors on our heads, and you can see our expressions in the featured images of those articles, and then you can read our words where we tell you what we saw when we put those things on our faces. So very plain, direct reporting from us each within the span of, a week or two of each other. And we haven't been able to put those on our heads since then. That's the last we've been able to do reporting wise. So anything else you're seeing out there is, as far as we're concerned, unconfirmed until we actually go and do another demo. This is me speaking off the cuff about that. I haven't spoken to David in weeks, and I'm curious if he would echo that or completely disagree with it. I'm guessing he's going to echo exactly what I said.
Yeah, no, I definitely echoed that. That's one of the ones where we'll just have to see. I don't think there's anything new we have to say about it. The situation kind of remains where it was. I wouldn't be pre-ordering it or anything like that. Let's just wait and see what happens there.
Yeah, that's been our line, I think, in articles covering visor for at least 2 years, maybe. I'm guessing 2 years. Hello to Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop, has popped up into our comments. Codec avatar, you mean the one that runs on a PC with a 3090? Yes, we will cover that in David's article. He was very careful to point out the limitations on the current avatar technology, but some of the breakthrough technologies that are right there to kind of push us over the cusp and get that onto lower cost hardware. But historically, we'll get to that. Let's get into the Premier League. Player airing a live VR recreation of a football match next week. That would be a soccer match for us in the United States, right, David?
Yes, indeed. We're talking about what you would call soccer. So on this show and on UploadVR, we cover the various ways in which live sports are being shown in VR. and mixed reality. So the most obvious one is that you have a real 180-degree camera somewhere in the stadium, or multiple cameras in the stadium, ideally, to switch angles. And that can either be 2D or 3D, but it's a 180-degree video. That's not what this is, to be clear. I'm just adding some background context. The other approach we've seen in recent years, and this has been for both the NBA and football/soccer, is to show you a tabletop diorama scale 3D real-time recreation of the match. So these are virtual characters on a virtual version of the pitch or field or court, whatever the sport calls it, that are moving based on motion capture real-time rigs in the stadium. And this is something that's been developed in sports over the past decade, not for this purpose, but so that they can go after the match and do really detailed physical, motion analytics and say, well, you moved wrong here and your pose was wrong here. That's something that's just happened, and VR and mixed reality can piggyback off it. So these two different approaches, you got the 180-degree 2D or 3D, you got the tabletop diorama scale. Well, this Premier League player app is taking a slightly different approach. It's fundamentally the same technology as this tabletop approach, except it's at full scale. So you are sitting in the stadium, you are watching the match in 3D, and this is inherently sixed off, right? Because it's just like a video game. It's like watching a game of FIFA or Football Manager, except you're in VR and the players are moving based on real live match movement. So the graphics here don't look great, and I think that's kind of my concern here, is that I don't think that this approach scales up well from tabletop to full scale, because the graphics are quite primitive. It seems that, if you did want to watch a match like this, you'd prefer to have either the tabletop, or ideally, I think for most people, the 180-degree 2D or 3D. And, this comes just a few weeks after DAZN, or DAZN, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, streamed the FIFA World Club Cup, not to be confused with the World Cup, in 180-degree 2D. And I actually tried that. That was one of the other things I tried over my holiday, and I thought it was very impressive, because obviously I have an interest in football, or what you would call soccer, so I thought that was great. To me, this doesn't have a huge appeal, but there's fundamentally no reason that they couldn't try this out, realize this isn't a great idea, and scale it down to tabletop. One thing I do want to note, though, in their defense, is you do get a regular 2D flat screen view of the match as well, beside you, I think above you on a giant screen. So you're looking down at the virtual pitch and you're seeing the real one. Still, I don't think with this level of graphical fidelity, it's going to be particularly appealing to most fans.
Arlen, I would be curious, can you explain the difference between Mocha and Doxis? I'm mixing up two different technologies, and I'd be curious if you can explain what each of those technologies do. Arlen's a network expert out there, and they're talking about DOCSIS 4.0 for this to work, as well as flat screen quality. It's a really interesting thing to think about.
Sure.
Overall.
To be clear, this doesn't need much bandwidth at all. This is not like a volumetric real-time recreation. These are just video game characters that are moving based on the same movement of the player. They're being, there isn't that much bandwidth required to drive these. You're just giving them like a motion pose and a position for the ball. Everything else is pre-made. They are made for the players. I don't even think these have like distinct appearances. They're just, they do say they've gotten the kits right. So I think maybe you get the numbers on them, but these are just video game characters that are being moved around. You don't need much bandwidth here at all.
Yeah, I'm thinking DOCSIS is the standard for like how basically it gives the upper limit on how fast your router can ultimately be, or your networking can be. But I could be wrong on that. I'll wait for Arlen to explain all that. But this is really interesting to think about, this trade-off, David, of sacrificing detail in order for, like, it's almost the walkabout representation of gaming, right? This is very low poly. But this is going to be performant all across an entire season, I would imagine, wouldn't it? Like, why wouldn't any sport be represented this way, with this stick figure like characters? Like, well, number one, I want to call this diorama scale. Is there a better term for this?
Well, I mean, to be clear, this one is at full scale. You're sitting
Oh,
in this. That's
okay.
what I'm trying to say. That's what this makes this one different. It's the same approach as the diorama scale. All the technology is the same, except they're doing it at a larger scale. It's still the NBA is the same exact thing. They're little video game character versions of the players, and they're moving based on the player's real time motion capture, but not in the sense of like volumetric, just in tracking the skeleton.
So if I had an A/B test, right? Like I had a button on my controller or my headset, and I could flip between diorama scale and full scale with this exact same data set in front of me. Do you think there would be a preference of like which mode you'd want to be in more of the time?
That's a great question. I think it would be great for someone to try it. Again, there's no reason they couldn't do it for this. Technologically, it's just scaling the game world. There's nothing crazy difficult involved there from a developer perspective. This is just how they've chosen to approach this. I think the reason that diorama works better now is because of the quality of these virtual characters, and that's not limited by like the capture rig. That's just what this game is, delivering on standalone mobile hardware. I should point out that this Premier League player app is actually a game, and this is something that they've kind of put in as a side feature, so that the game is actually that you do things like headers, and you can play as a keeper. And it used to be a paid game, and now it's recently gone free to play. And this is like a side feature inside it, so it's not even the main function of the app. So I think they're probably just reusing their existing kind of graphical stuff. I'll see if I can bring up any screenshot of this.
There's a play I remember. I can't remember who the player is, but it's he's downfield. It happens in the blink of an eye, but the dude gets fully vertical, upside down. He basically does a bicycle kick upside down with a ball that was heading in the opposite direction, and makes a goal off of that. And the video of this in like 1080p or 4K, I've watched it maybe 16, 20 times. I'm not even a soccer fan. Like it's just that beautiful of a play to have performed. There's lots of plays like that in football, right, where a wide receiver goes in for a diving catch and just barely pulls it in. And right, people in our audience are all thinking of those moments as they've watched over the last 10 years in 4K on these amazing screens. And they're trying to compare that to this, going, aren't I losing something from having both? And what I
Yeah,
think is fascinating is yes, yeah, like I like David's, yeah, yes, you are losing something. But imagine a replay of this 5 seconds later. Like imagine that play I just described, where you have an amazing goal and you're watching on this little stick figure like no texture system, and then 5 seconds of processing happen, and you watch it fully textured exactly as if these were little miniature versions. Now 10 seconds pass, and you can zoom in and be on the field while this play happens around you. And so you're actually standing there as this diving catch happens right in front of you. But like what I'm discussing is the processing power of a server farm trying to recreate reality for you in near real time. And it's been promised for years. And what we're all wanting something in this area, but we've got to figure out like what's the right minimum resolution for these things. And I don't know, David, are you going to watch this live next week?
I mean, I'll definitely try it to see what it's like, but what you describe is obviously the ideal future decades from now when you have a truly volumetric image capture. Then you can go in and watch these moments. But right now, if you were to watch one of these moments in this, you would see these little low detailed, low poly guys moving around, probably not fully accurately. I think the Dazn approach, or Dazone as people are telling me in the comments, it's pronounced, where you do it as a miniature while showing the regular match there, is more appealing. But for me, I'm going to be frank, I prefer the traditional 180 degree video approach. I prefer the camera in the stadium. I tried this with the DAZN thing. I have an image here just of the NBA, just to illustrate to the audience what we're talking about. I prefer this. This to me, seeing right now the actual pixels from the real camera being in the stadium, I thought it was great for the Chelsea match, the final of the World Club Cup. And I just want to see it high resolution in 3D. That's what I want. I understand that if you're doing multitasking, maybe you want the 3D tabletop version, like you see here in the NBA's example. But there's no reason that you couldn't also, bring up your laptop here, right? Like your virtual laptop right here in front of you and then have the game behind you. For me, immersive video is the way to watch sports. You're muted in.
Welcome back to the UploadVR studios with David and Ian. That's, of course, I unmuted myself twice there, and I got it wrong on the reverse. It's as I'm looking all at this, David, it's really interesting to think about how our home cameras are becoming more that they're all becoming commoditized, high quality home cameras, but that hides the investment that has been placed in camera equipment for every sporting venue in the world, right? Like, we think about these low cost 10 megapixel, 12, 15 megapixel cameras as like commodities now, and we complain about, I see it all over the internet, the AIs filling in the details to take you from 10 megapixels of actual optical resolution up to 20x zoom, and that gap between 10x zoom and 20x zoom is filled in by AI filling in the details of the scene. Think about that. Like, that's the commodity end of picture making. But at this other end that we don't talk about or don't see very often, there are people spending tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars to equip entire stadiums with sensing equipment to provide us with views 10, 15, 30 years from now. You just showed a clip of one of them. You know, how much does it cost to equip an entire stadium full of these, such that over the course of an entire season of your favorite team's play, you can get an angle that takes you exactly where you want to be. They were saying it was Ronaldo, was the soccer goal I described. This video that, even not as a soccer fan, it's still etched in my brain. And me just describing it on a podcast, our viewers knew which video I was talking about, right?
Yeah.
To get that exactly right in VR, this camera needs to be set up about 10 feet in front of Ronaldo, right exactly when he's doing that kick, to get us the exact amount of detail exactly at the right moment.
Sure. But I think even having one that's just beside the pitch, close enough to him, is good enough. And, you know, in that DAZN stream of the World Club Cup, they had, you know, an angle behind the net, as you would expect, at the corners, for corners, in the midfield for kickoff. And I think as long as, you know, for now, using this kind of cameras that we have today, which still aren't everywhere, right? We're still talking about all of these NBA and DAZN streams being 2D 180, so it's only one of these lenses, it's not both. We still haven't got to what the company that Apple acquired, NextVR, a decade ago, was delivering in their tests back then. I love your vision of a future where all this is being volumetrically captured and you can move to any position you want and have a high quality view. But I just want to be very clear that we are probably at least a decade away from that, if not multiple decades. And we're still at the point where, like, we're still waiting. We say this so often in this show, it might as well be part of the VR download drinking game. When are we going to get live sports broadcast in 3D 180 degrees? When I first saw the press release info for this Premier League thing, I thought that's what it was, because they said, oh, it's live in VR in 3D. And then I open it and I see what some of our audience are saying looks like, you know, a FIFA game from 20 years ago on a PlayStation 2. It's like, I don't think this is appealing. It's just, there's this massive disparity between what you're describing, which I want just as much as you, to be clear. I want it absolutely as much as you, and where the technology is today, or should I really say the deployment of the technology is today.
Yeah, so there's a model for this where at the completion of the game, right, the moment the game ends, you actually have FIFA whatever 26 do a complete volumetric, you know, shot for shot recreation of the entire game using some of these data sets. And like, all I'm saying is, you're right about the 20-year path here, but they need to be installing cameras now for the in-headset, like, that the shots that really sell headsets are the ones that I'm talking about, like Ronaldo doing his bicycle kick at the right shot on that camera you need to have enough cameras in the stadium to make that work. And you need to be starting now to build out those cameras. That you're talking about a $30 million investment in cameras.
Sure.
Entire stadium, and you need to set that investment over 15 years, right? Like, and by year 10, hopefully you have 10 million subscribers to the cost of the next generation of cameras.
Sure. Yeah. No, agreed there. It does need to be. I would imagine that Meta or Apple is already doing this sort of investment. We haven't heard from it, but I talked about last week how Billie Eilish was referring to James Cameron setting up cameras for her concert. So it's clear that that partnership is in play.
I have a theory.
Oh, sorry.
F1, right? F1. Didn't we hear some rumors about F1? Apple getting the rights to F1. But
Yeah,
wouldn't it be amazing if the Apple's car technology that they canceled let them track the car movements in incredible detail for us to get that volumetric detail out of F1
so
across
again,
an entire season?
I want to be clear about the whole volumetric thing. Nobody is anywhere near shipping anything like that. What we did have, and I think we discussed about a year ago on this show, there was a third-party company that was doing this tabletop approach called Laps. I'll see if I can bring up a screenshot. I don't know if I can at the moment, but it was using the positional data for each car and doing a virtual recreation. I want to be clear what I mean by virtual recreation. It's like a video game. It's the same thing. It's a 3D model. It's moving around, but it's on the motion of that. Apple did do a F1 immersive experience. I think maybe this is why you're off. It's like a 5-minute video. You have a little camera that's on the side of the F1 car going around with Brad Pitt, but because of the limitations of putting a camera on an F1 car, it's actually Apple's first 2D 180-degree video that they've put out since Vision Pro, and the quality wasn't really great. The motion clarity wasn't great, but it's a start. The last thing I would just want to say before we move on, unless of course you have something else to add, of course, is that like I think we underestimate, and I always say this, how many normal people enjoy even the basic 180-degree 2D. This is, again, I'm using the screenshot of the NBA, but I showed on my break quite a few people the DAZN clip, sorry, not the clip, the whole match or parts of the match from the World Club Cup final. And even for a 180-degree video, these are obviously football/soccer fans, they were amazed. They thought this was incredible. They said, you know, if this headset was lighter and this was something for all the matches, I would get one for this. Like, even this today, I'm excited to even just see this get available to more people as headsets get lighter and these become available for more matches, as much as we all wish it was 3D right now. So anything else you want to add on that, or do you want to move on to our next topic there?
Yeah, I think I just want to add that F1 has a really nice overlap with the simulator community, meaning there's the one in our comments kind of sparked this off, licenses holding this up. And then we see indications that Apple is investing in F1. We've seen indications that Meta is investing in UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship, as indications of where they might be going with those licenses, right? Those are great testing grounds for them to test out those ideas. But imagine, David, sitting in your racing chair at home in your Vision Pro, and you have a 3D screen up there at not 180 degrees, but you've got it floating as like a window into the F1 race that is happening concurrent to your simulated F1 race that is happening in your seat. And so your chair is bouncing with the wheel, with the roadway of whatever road the racers are on, and you're driving a wheel right here in time with the F1 race. You have a ghost car following the F1 race that's simulated in your own bedroom. I can imagine there would be a small, high-paying community of people that would do that in an instant. You know, they would drop $5 to $10 grand on that rig to do that exact experience.
This is certainly an interesting idea. I was, when you said that, it made me think of golf as well. You can imagine that while certain golf tournaments are on, Golf Plus or another similar app could have sort of ghost versions of the players go round, and you could join them and see how you would fare. And obviously,
Golf Plus had tested some stuff there, yeah.
Yeah, and it would be fascinating to see that kind of happen as these major tournaments are going on. yeah, there's a lot of potential for sports of all kinds here, and with technology, and we're very excited for where this is going, and we keep just wondering when is Apple or Meta
No,
going to
I
launch the
appreciate
live.
David, you're going to have to keep doing the setting expectations thing, because we're how many years into this, and we've seen a new company try to do this every 6 months to a year, and they always have a cool twist on it, but they don't have the licenses, nor do they have the installations that are going to take, as David is pointing out, 10 to 15 years to really
Well,
build up all of this for us.
yeah, to get to, volumetric. But I just want to be clear, like today, you can watch 52 NBA games free every season with your Quest in 180-degree 2D. I get people telling me all the time how much they enjoy that. They've obviously started testing NHL as well, as we talked about. So that app that we're talking about, if you're wondering, is X Stadium, X and then Tadium. And you can get that for free in North America on your Quest. But yes, let's move on to the next topic. We could talk about sports all day, and I'd love to, but we do, I think, have a hard cutoff in about 90 minutes from now. So let's get into the next topic, which is my editorial about the changes to Quest's boundary system and the kind of dangerous safety issue that was introduced there. So let's kind of just go over to start how this worked at the launch of Quest 3 and 3S. And we'll also relate that back to the original Quest. So when you start up your Quest 3 or 3S and put it on your head, you're in pass-through mixed reality. We all know that. That hasn't changed. That's been the case since Quest 3 shipped. You start in pass-through. When you then go into VR by either going to your virtual home or launching a VR app, what it used to do is that it would, if you didn't already have a boundary set up, prompt you to look around the room, pan your head around the room, and it would scan the floor and suggest a boundary. And if you had a large enough space, it would create this kind of dynamic shape called a room scale boundary. And if you didn't, it would create just a little circle around you called a stationary boundary. What's changed here in the last 9 months is that they don't do that anymore. If you start up a VR game or go into your VR home, you will just be by default put into this stationary boundary, this circle around you. And this factors into a change that actually happened in 2022. So when the original Quest launched, both the stationary and the room scale boundaries would show you this grid, this colored grid as you got close. But in 2022, they changed it so that only the room scale boundary would do this. Instead, for the stationary boundary, when you got close to the edge, it would start to fade into pass-through, such that when you pass the edge, you would be fully in pass-through. So that's fine if you intentionally or knowingly initiated a stationary boundary, which you may do, for example, for sitting, right? If you're sitting, that's completely fine. This is what you want. In fact, if you're only sitting down, this new system where it just goes straight in to a stationary boundary is great. It gets rid of friction, right? That's clearly the purpose here, that you don't have this kind of barrier before you go into VR. You're just straight in. But what happens if you're playing standing up? Well, then if you have a large space, you'll run into the issue that as soon as you walk a few steps, you'll be pushed in to pass through and have to set up a room scale boundary anyway. So that doesn't save you any time. It just moves the time. Now, if you're in a small space, this is where the safety issue comes in, because not only do they have this behavior now, but they also have kind of increased the distance for which it will fade into pass through. And it's no longer like a gradual fade. It's kind of once you get to the edge here, it kind of harshly kicks in. And so if you're in a small space, you put on your Quest and go into VR, you'll find yourself bumping into real world objects because you don't see this grid anymore. You don't get to pass through until you're all the way to the edge. You just bump into real world objects. Now, I mentioned that one of the primary purposes for this is getting rid of friction, right? That annoying step of, set up your boundary. I get that, and it's admirable that Meta wants to get rid of that. The problem is that I think they wanted to get to the level of seamlessness as Vision Pro, because it works very similarly. You start in this kind of stationary boundary centered around you in a remarkably similar radius. It actually seems to be an identical radius between these two headsets, but there's a massive and important difference. Vision Pro has a LiDAR sensor that enables always on depth understanding. So in Vision Pro, when you move towards a real world object, real world geometry, furniture, objects, people, in this space, regardless of what distance you are from the radius, you will fade into pass-through. That object will start to fade in front of you. You get this active safety from Vision Pro. On Quest, this does not exist. So Meta wants to have the same level of seamlessness as Vision Pro's VR and low friction, except without having the technology in place to make it safe. Why doesn't Meta have that technology? Well, no Quest headset to date has an actual active hardware level depth sensor. They compute depth using computer vision, and only when developers enable the depth API. Why not always? Because using computer vision, comparing the view from the two front grayscale cameras and doing a kind of depth from disparity algorithm has a computational and battery cost. Even actually sampling the cameras in the first place has a cost, but doing this kind of depth API has a cost. So if you were to turn this on in every VR app, right, where anyone goes into a stationary pass-through, or stationary boundary, sorry, you would then have to tank the performance of that VR app, because the difference in doing something in software, computer vision, versus hardware is that the hardware is compute free, right? It's doing it on a hardware level. You're not running an algorithm on the CPU, GPU, and NPU. You're just getting depth from the nature of how LiDAR works, right? So essentially, what is the solution here? Well, Meta needs to either properly prompt you to start a room scale boundary when you launch a VR app again, if you want to, or start showing the grid for the stationary boundary again, or start fading into pass-through earlier, or ship a headset with active level depth sensing. Vision Pro isn't the only one. Pico 4 Ultra has a iToF sensor that is kind of a very similar concept to LiDAR, and they are able to do that in hardware. So, it's possible that Meta is able to come up with a low compute power algorithm that can sense obstacles and fade them in. But until that date, this new Guardian is a safety issue. And this isn't hypothetical. I've been contacted over this year by numerous people, I think definitely double digits now, actually, where they've told me, I had no idea this system even changed. I put on my Quest one day and ended up smashing my wrist into a wall. Someone even punched a family member because they didn't realize that this system had changed. And so I think we're going to need to see some change here from Meta, or I guess they can just ignore this. But it's so ironic that, like, the whole issue of would you bump into physical objects and people and furniture was this big hypothetical concern for the original Oculus Quest. And the Guardian system was praised for how, even though it took time and friction, right? At the original Quest, you always had to draw it out manually. It only was with Quest 3 and 3S that it could scan your floor and suggest one. The advantage of this was it was safe, right? It did deliver safety. It wasn't perfect. It's not, the active fade-in objects thing of Vision Pro, but it was safe. And the current system sacrifices safety for seamlessness that Meta's technology cannot yet support.
Ooh, comments are all on fire. I feel bad reading out Guy Godin's comment, but you can go look at his comment in our feed, just because I don't want to amplify his comment if he didn't mean for it to be amplified out there. But he's basically saying, the creator of Virtual Desktop, that he's hearing a lot of reports echoing exactly what David just said. So independent of one another, David's speaking, about all the reports he's heard, and then Guy Godin, while he's speaking, says basically the exact same thing. And this is move fast and break things. This is developing a platform in real time with your users as the test bed. It is what Meta has done for a decade plus in VR in multiple ways, multiple platforms, multiple systems, Gear VR to Oculus Rift to Quest 1, 2, 3. And here we are. I think about this. It feels like Meta made a minimum viable product for VR right around the Quest 2. And Apple and Google said, correct, that is the minimum viable product. Now we will use all of our systems to superpower that minimum viable product to exactly where it should be, a full computing platform like Android or iOS. And Meta has been clawing tooth and nail to try to make Horizon OS an equivalent to those other platforms, while Android XR and Apple have absconded with their minimum viable product and all the things that they could do with it. And here we are with Meta trying to like show that they can actually do all the things beyond the minimum viable product in real time with our devices as dev kits that we didn't mean them to be. Like we're basically testing. Quest 2 and Quest 3 and 3. Well, I guess it would be Quest 3 and 3S. To me, are testing kits for whatever they want to do next with Horizon OS. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, the only other color I'd add there is that Meta is trying to do this at a lot lower cost than Apple and a lot lower cost than the Samsung headset. We don't know the cost of the Samsung headset yet, but it's likely to be thousands of dollars. We're talking about $300 and $500 headsets here, and we'll talk later about whether that's a valid approach, whether cost is really the primary bottleneck here. But they are trying to do this at a lot lower cost, a lot more accessible, and there are challenges there. I think we've talked for years about how the Guardian system is this big flaw in Quests, how it doesn't let you use enough space because it's kind of inherently 2D. It's 3D as you see it, but it's only on your floor and then from floor to infinity height. It doesn't have this 3D sense. It isn't this truly 3D active safety system that is kind of inherent to Vision Pro. And Meta obviously knows this. It wants to get rid of the friction of setting up Guardian. It does suck that when you want to just jump into VR, sometimes if it doesn't recognize your play space, you're kind of stuck to, spend this amount of time and go through and, scan around. And it's even worse if you're doing hand tracking, right? Which is clearly a key consideration here. If you're trying to set up a room scale boundary and the one suggested isn't right, painting it out with your hands is a really terrible UX. But that's where we are. I think they're trying to be ahead of where their current hardware is. And if they didn't want this, they should have put a real depth sensor in Quest 3 and 3S. They chose not to. I understand why, for cost and battery reasons, but then you have to go with it, right? It's like you can't have your cake and eat it too. You either have the low cost solution or you have the high end seamlessness that extra hardware affords. You can't have both.
Yeah, Davin Bigelow. I like Davin's comments in this discussion with LL asking this initial question. What do you think explains all these software missteps from this to all of the bugs? And then LL's reply, Meta would A/B test if people prefer eating pizza or the box that came in because they trust data over intuition. Intuitively, we might say actually cardboard has no nutritional value and tastes gross, but data first means they need to confirm that suspicion. I really like and think about that analogy, and if there's any truth to it, we need this is a feeling. This is a vibes sort of explanation. We'd need data to support it, but there have been so many A/B tests. Yeah. And the question away from it is, did they make the wrong conclusions from those A/B tests because of some flaw in the methodology? Maybe being the resolution of the headset, being like the methodology, like everything that you try to do is pretty crummy in VR if you're looking through a screen door at it.
Yeah.
That was true in 2016 and 2014 and 2012, and you can imagine entire generations of Meta employees have come and gone who that was the A/B test. That was their testing ground for 360 video, 180-degree video, social VR, all of it, right? All was tested on a low-resolution device that was looking through a screen door at reality.
That's certainly a factor that's important in a lot of the decisions at Meta, and there is this over-reliance. There is this focus on relying more on data than taste. The problem, of course, is that data can only take you from 1 to 2. It can't take you from 0 to 1. I think in this case, though, I doubt that's the reason. I think it's something that I see Steve Barr pointing out, that I've heard this certainly a lot, that Meta employees are incentivized to ship new things and come up with new ideas and change things for the sake of changing them, rather than refine or improve or polish what already exists. There are, incentives and the people who rise to the top are the ones who have shipped the fancy new idea, their bold new vision that they've proven out with some data, rather than the people that go back and maintain the stuff that people are actually using, or God forbid, actually just refine and improve stuff. This was something John Carmack often complained about, that, if you actually just took some of these half-baked ideas and drilled deep into them and added more features and polished them up and improved things and focused on, real user value, as Carmack used to speak about, you would get a lot further. But I think in this case, this is just wanting to have the Vision Pro seamlessness without having the technology. I think they've just done, as I said, prioritized lowering friction over safety, because friction is obviously something they measure. It's very easy to measure. How many seconds does it take from the user putting on the headset until they're inside the experience? This is absolutely a metric Meta measures. But do they measure, how many people have broken their wrist or, cut themselves or punched a family member in the face? I don't know if they have data for that. I can't see how they would.
Yeah, it's a very small percentage. That's how the PR reply will come from Meta's PR. It's a very small percentage of people affected by the face rash that happened with the Quest 2.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in that case, I guess some people would return and complain. In this case, how many people are going to punch the wall and complain to Meta support versus how many are just going to, stop using VR and never think about it again?
I will say that when I unboxed the refurbished Quest 2 that was sent to me to replace the bricked Quest 2 from Christmas, it came with a facial little it's not foam, plastic, or what is that material, overlay for on top, but basically like a VR cover for on top of the foam interface on the Quest 2. Meta started including those in the box after the facial aggravation issue I just described, the rashes that were forming on people's face back with the Quest 2. It was included in the box for this Quest 2 I received in replacement for their bricked Quest 2. And my kid is like putting it together and he's like, oh, this actually feels fine without this on. And I'm like, no, you're going to wear this on your face. Please do not remove this VR cover from your headset. I received many photos from people, not many photos. I received photos from people indicating what could happen otherwise. So yeah, that was 5 years ago, and now we're complaining about this, the software. And what was the head of mixed reality at Meta telling us at MetaConnect last year? The platform is solid now.
Stable era we were entering, yeah. Fundamentally changing the Guardian system without really communicating it to people or explaining it. I wouldn't call that stable, but yeah, I think we could talk about this all day as well, but let's move on to next topic. So we have
Please do hit that like button. I was rocking my head during David's thing. I would like to see, as he was unfolding that, cut into a rap video into I could really beat to, bounce my head to what he was saying. But yes, let's move on to the Horizon OS software updates, David.
Yeah, indeed. So we're going to talk about two different Quest Horizon OS software updates. Firstly, Quest V79. This is the latest update, and usually you get, 5 to 10 new features or changes, but this one seems to only have 2 that are at least publicly acknowledged by Meta. The flagship new feature of Quest V79 is that it matches the color temperature of 2D windows to your real environment's ambient lighting. So here's a screenshot provided to us by Luna, who got V79 a couple of hours before I did, or released this feature specifically, showing exactly what I mean by this. So you may be familiar with this on traditional devices. If you have an iPhone, an iPad, a Mac, a Google Nest Hub smart display, or a Pixel tablet, you will have seen this feature already. Apple calls it True Tone. On Nest Hub, Google calls it Ambient EQ. And because Google is Google and Pixel tablet, they call it Adaptive Tone. Yes, they have 2 different names for the same feature on different Google devices, because of course they do. How this works on those traditional devices is that they use an ambient light sensor to detect the color temperature of the ambient light and then adjust the screen. MetaQuest headsets do not have an ambient light sensor. So what Meta seems to be doing here is using a computer vision algorithm to analyze the pass-through feed. Just for a little bit of context, if you don't know what I mean by color temperature, especially if you're not watching, if you're listening at the moment, it refers to how warm or cool the white light is as a baseline, and it's measured in Kelvin K. You may have encountered this if you've ever purchased an LED light bulb, or if you've had an adjustable LED light bulb. That's the kind of context where it will dramatically change the atmosphere, the vibe of your physical room based on what your color temperature of your light bulb is. And something that in wider society people have been complaining about in cities, and quite rightly, I think, is that in the shift from traditional filaments in outdoor lighting on street lamps, for example, they were naturally, by their nature, warm light. And a lot of the LEDs that were put in are cool light. And so you get this much more kind of harsh, less cozy, less just less nice atmosphere in some cities now. But some people think that this is something inherent to LED light bulbs, which are many times more efficient than these old filaments and are great in that sense. But it's not. It's a choice. It's a configurable option of LED light bulbs. You can buy ones that are really, really warm and really, really cool. That's a choice. But to come back to what we're talking about here today, this means that in any 2D window in Quest's home space, so whether you are in your virtual home or in pass-through, or if you are multitasking, if you have that open, it should work, will have its color temperature adjusted to your pass-through. To be clear on what I just said, actually, I haven't tested it in multitasking, so I don't know if that's the case. But in your pass-through, certainly this does work. I do have this update now, and it works as described. It makes the virtual 2D window feel a bit more cohesive with the real-world environment. You don't have this kind of weird feeling where it feels kind of very off and differently lit. But it is only 2D windows, to be clear. On Apple Vision Pro, this is done in the shared space automatically for all virtual elements, be them 2D, 3D, whatever. If they're in the shared space or they use Reality Kit, this comes by default. Quest does not have that, so mixed reality objects will not have their color temperature adjusted to your real environment. This is only for 2D windows, but that's still a nice polishing touch. I think this is a good move. I don't see anything negative about this.
Well, what if it's performance related over time? What if this is the first of many steps to try to replicate the way that Apple senses the environment and relights everything in your scene for that? And if they're taking any overhead from the chip to do those beyond just simply changing the color tone of everything. Like, this doesn't seem like it would be intensive in any way, but what if this is the first of many steps to try to match that?
It's certainly an interesting thought. This, as you say, would be trivial. There's no compute cost in this. This is a well-known algorithm of just figuring out the average color temperature. You could do this decades ago. But in terms of whether they want to go further, I could see that happening. You could see Meta providing, even something as simple as the direction of lighting so that the shadows for virtual objects can be correct. Today, if you're making a mixed reality app for Quest, you can, of course, add shadows, but you just have to pick an arbitrary direction of light. You don't get that provided by the system. Apple Vision Pro, of course, does provide that, and not even provide, it's just handled automatically. You as a developer put a 3D model textured with a material in the environment, Apple will light it and add shadows and things like that. That would be interesting to see if that kind of light estimation comes. It's done on AR Core and AR Kit on smartphones, so it's definitely doable, and Vision Pro shows it's doable. But interestingly, for this in general, Vision Pro relies on a combination of computer vision and the ambient light sensor, whereas you could imagine certain edge cases where this might be tricked. For example, if you're in like a very yellow room or a very white room in certain circumstances, this could probably be tricked. I guess, unless you have anything to add on this, I'll just cover the other change in V79 and we can move on. Yeah, so the other change is just the Files app. They've made some big upgrades to Quest Files app. It has search now by file name, groundbreaking stuff, I know, but it is, they have to build this up bit by bit. They have tabs here that allow you to find files more easily. Most notably, they can now open PDFs. The Files app can open PDFs. You could open PDFs on Quest using Adobe Acrobat, the web app, but you had to sign in to an Adobe account and it didn't work offline. So being able to open PDFs natively is a big move forward if that's something you care about. The other thing is that it has an open with prompt now, just like you see on Windows, Mac, Android. You can click a file and open with, and that actually even works with side-loaded apps. So if you side-loaded an MP3 player, you could open the Files app, click on an MP3 that you've just downloaded and go open with and choose that app. So these are minor changes to make this more of a computing platform. Any serious computing is still going to require, using that Windows 11 integration or virtual desktop or something to use another device. But you can see Meta starting to put the real first steps, the preliminary steps to making this a serious computing platform, not in the same sense as Windows or Mac, but in the same sense as something like an iPad over time.
Interesting to think about. I'm ready to move on to our meta research here because that's gonna sort of
just one.
Go ahead.
Sure. Sorry, just that we have one more software update, but it'll bring us in because we're going to talk about avatars today, a real, shipping meta avatars, and then we'll go straight into the meta avatars research because I'm also keen to get into that, Ian. I share your enthusiasm there very much so. So when it comes to the meta avatars of today, the successors to the ones we're using in this studio, not the ones we're using the old meta avatars, they have just gotten a big update that dramatically increases the body and face customization. It also, in the US and Canada, brings an AI outfit assist. So one of the big criticisms of the new meta avatars, as well as the old ones, was that it didn't really represent the full range of human body types and shapes and different body parts. And so that's a criticism Meta seems to be wanting to address with this update. So there are now 12 starting body shapes, as you can see here, that you start off with, as well as a bunch of sliders that let you customize things like your waist, your rear, your stomach, your hips, your shoulders.
Show me the craziest version of it, David.
Sorry?
I want
to... you muted yourself, Ian.
How did I end up on mute? I wasn't.
You had your hand out like this.
I was petting the cat. Petting the cat made me mute it. All right. I want to see the weirdest human you can make out of this. What does it look like, Matt?
I would love to see that too. Audience, please, if you do make one, please share it with us in some way. We'd love to see. You could upload it to some image sharing system and send it to us. We'd love to see that. You tips at UploadVR.com. But this is a lot more than it used to be and allows you to do things like customize leg muscles, torso muscles. I know there was someone in our audience, maybe it was Blair, the developer of Technolust, that actually was very concerned that you couldn't make muscular characters before. He was concerned about that, and he wanted to represent himself. I've never seen him in real life, but I assume that means he's buff, so I guess he can do that now. The same thing is the case now for face head shapes. There are more to choose from, 16 again, and there are now sliders for this kind of customization for your shape. And this is in addition to the existing customization for skin tone, eyebrow color and shape, eye color and shape, eyelash color and style, precise nose, mouth, and ear shape adjustment. And as always, if you don't like tweaking all these things, if you aren't, a 3D, I guess not 3D artist is the right word here, but if you don't like spending a bunch of time to try and represent yourself, or you're not good at it, which is a lot of people, right? A lot of people see character creators and they go, I just don't know how to make myself. You can still create your avatar from a selfie. And with this new update, these parameters are used by the selfie system. So it has more different variation to work from. So it can actually match your face better. So if you did create a meta avatar from a selfie months ago when this launched, October, I think, you can now go back, create a new one, but you'll still have to do the body part yourself. These kind of pre-made ones or these sliders, you'll have to go and do yourself. The other change here for meta avatars is that in the US and Canada, you can now type the description of the outfit you want and have AI find the virtual clothes that match it. So to be clear, this isn't generating new clothing. You type what you want and it goes and picks from the clothing library to match. So you type an outfit or a vibe and it finds it. They already do have clothing generation, like t-shirts, but the results there are mixed. Sorry, what were you saying there?
That's just why not? Like, are they trying to support both systems? Like, they want you to buy clothes and also generate clothes, or not generate clothes? What is the idea here?
So I think they definitely want to support their kind of virtual economy thing here, where they do want you to buy clothes. The other thing is that, like, AI generation of textures and things like this for clothes, you're not going to get the results you see here. They always just seem, maybe it's just the models Meta are using, and theoretically you could do better models. It's just a little bit off, a little bit blotchy, a little bit, it just looks like it was AI generated, to put it that way. So I can't try this out, but if you're in the US or Canada, you can try all these features out. So you can either AI generate a t-shirt, like an actual new pattern, or you can just ask the AI to find an outfit. You know, you describe the vibe and it goes and picks the outfit you want. But in general, this is good news that they have more body shapes now. People, I saw a lot of people complaining before that they just couldn't make the body look anything like theirs.
And for context, over in VR chat, they are in the middle of beta testing their marketplace with creators able to list entire avatar packs that they can that other people can buy and outfit as their avatar. There are artists working in that field, creating works of art for other people to inhabit and embody and become. And that's, running in complete parallel to this, those slider system you just saw, right? There's actually a marketplace emerging for handcrafted VR personas, and there's people paying for those avatars as we speak. So we also want to hear from those people. Tips at uploadvr.com. Right before I went on vacation, we covered some of those ideas, and we got a couple of people in the emails telling us, yeah, I'm one of those people who are testing out the VR chat avatar marketplace. And goodness, we got to follow that really closely. We want to hear about those people that are breaking through and making real art and maybe a business out of their art that other people pay for and don inside of virtual reality.
Yeah, that VR chat avatar marketplace is super interesting. As of course it already was an unofficial thing. You could already, of course, go out and buy VR chat avatars from creators, and there were other marketplaces. But centralizing that is going to have some trade-offs, obviously, and creators have voice those concerns, but also big advantages for some customers in terms of how easily and kind of reputably they can access those avatars. So yeah, now that we've discussed that, let's talk about the future of very different kind of avatars. Meta often calls these your like expressionistic avatars when talking about the long-term future. But what about your photorealistic avatar? What about when you don't want to show up in an boardroom meeting as one of these things? You want to show up as a photorealistic codec avatar. Well, Meta this week has shown off some of their latest research on codec avatars, and this is a great opportunity to kind of recap where they are and some of the really significant changes over the past year. So the current research that they're showing off, the new version, I should say, it's not a completely new system. The new version is a new model that separately models the head and the hair, and that allows for switching out the hairstyle at runtime without needing a new scan. On Apple Vision Pro, the personas, it captures your hair as it is at the time. It doesn't really capture the back of your hair as well. With this approach they're using, you could easily swap out the hairstyle at will, pick whatever kind of hairstyle you want, and there's this kind of almost cursed aspect to giving people completely different hairstyles that would never naturally be on their body. But the purpose of the research is to allow this to be a separate thing. And this also has advantages for how the seams between the hair and the head are rendered, including things like fringes. They're now much more natural because the system understands the difference between them. It also would allow for much better support of things like hats in future. But this is kind of an interesting novelty in itself. It's more what's happened over the past year that we haven't really ever found time on this show to go into that is interesting. So for a kind of background context, if you have no idea what we're even talking about here, for a decade now, Meta's been researching and developing this technology called codec avatars, photorealistic digital representations of humans driven in real time by the face and eye tracking of VR headsets. The highest quality prototypes achieve the remarkable feat of passing the uncanny valley in Ian's personal experience. The goal of codec avatars is to deliver social presence, the subconscious feeling that you're truly with another person despite them not being physically there. No shipping technology today can truly do this. And video calls don't even come close. It does not actually feel like the person is there with a video call. So to eventually ship codec avatars, Meta has been working on three things: increasing the system's realism and adaptability. So that's one of the things you're seeing here today. Reducing the real-time rendering requirements. That's something Guy Godin brought up at the start of the show. And making it possible to generate them with a smartphone scan. The Codec avatars originally, when these were first being developed, each new avatar had to be generated using a massive custom camera array of more than 100 cameras, hundreds of lights in this very specific Meta studio. This is how you had to create an avatar. Obviously, we all know this could never be shipped as a product. But last year, Meta essentially made a breakthrough. So for years, Meta had been showing off lower quality codec avatars that could be generated using a smartphone. And they kind of had these two parallel systems, right? The high quality ones that you were, generating with this rig, and then these smartphone ones that were lower quality. And this was very more apparent in motion. But then they had these higher quality ones. But last year, they essentially were able to merge the advantages of both using something called a universal prior, a universal model. So they train this universal model using this capture setup and a couple of hundred participants. But then once they have it developed, generating a new avatar can be done using just a kind of smartphone pan around your face. And this was made possible by the move to Gaussian splatting last year. Gaussian splatting, you will hear us talk about all the time. It is a revolution in kind of volumetric rendering. As I often say on this show, it is doing for volumetric rendering what large language models did for chatbots. It's this kind of out of nowhere almost hyper technology that allows what used to be something that was decades off for science fiction, or many years at least, accelerate into shipping products in the same way that if before LLMs, before transformers, if you asked the average AI expert how long would it be until an AI passed the Turing test, on average the response, and this is not a hypothetical, this was done, the response on average was decades. It was 2040, 2050, 2060. LLMs appear and they are able to do this now. Gaussian splatting is the same thing for volumetric rendering, in the sense that it has the same effect on the industry. So these Gaussian codec avatars are able to be generated with 1 hour of server processing time after a quick smartphone pan. So that's kind of where Meta is today. They're also inherently relightable because of the nature of Gaussian splatting. So that makes them highly suitable for real-time VR. So, a major complaint of this demo between Lex Fridman and Mark Zuckerberg used to be, but this requires, this giant capture rig to scan each of them. And that was absolutely true at the time. But over the past year, Meta has actually managed to push through that with this universal model. It is now no longer the case that you need that scan. It is still the case, however, as Guy Godin noted, that this is running on PC VR. They are able to do multiple of these avatars in real time on a consumer GPU like an RTX 3090 or something like that, or one of the newer ones. But they haven't yet gotten this running on a mobile chip, or at least they haven't demoed it. They did demo certain codec avatars years ago on a mobile chip, but again, it was these lower quality versions. So we do know, though, that it's possible because Apple is shipping it in Vision OS 26. It's not quite up to the quality of the Meta Codec Avatars research, but these are obviously research prototypes. But what Apple is shipping in Vision OS 26 when it comes to these, improved personas that get pretty close, that is also powered by Gaussian splatting, this kind of revolutionary technology. So I don't think we're too far off seeing Codec Avatar ship now. It's this in the same way, if you asked me before Gaussian splatting and before this kind of change, this would be a very different answer. But now we do have this kind of, I don't want to use the word magic, but you do have this kind of Hail Mary that has come out of nowhere. So the biggest limit, I think, for actually getting codec avatars shipping in a Meta headset is that none of them today have face and eye tracking. You aren't driving these with face and eye tracking sensors on a Quest 3 or 3S because they don't have those sensors. Quest Pro was discontinued earlier this year, at the start of this year, at the change of 2024 to 2025. And it has, much lower end compute. So the answer to when this might ship in terms of being face tracked and eye tracked avatars, I don't think it's a limitation of can they get this running on these headsets anymore. I think they are in the final lap here. I think we are a year or two away, and it's going to depend on when Meta is going to put face and eye tracking hardware into a headset. What I think might happen first, though, and I'm not the first to speculate on this, is that they might do a simpler 2D version that estimates your face tracking based on AI for the one specific use case of the virtual webcam thing. So if I can find this, in the same way that we were talking about last week, Zoom coming to Quest and using the terrible Meta avatar virtual webcam, they could swap this out. This is only my speculation, but I think the first time we'll see Meta Codec avatars is that instead of seeing your Meta avatar, they'll have this 2D stream of a Codec avatar, and that might be the first way it's shipped. Where again, it wouldn't be a real face movement because Quest 3 does not have face tracking sensors, but it would be just an estimated version.
A motivating factor for you to get Meta, you pay Meta to be verified. You pay Meta to get verified. You do this face scan, and they're going to protect you after that from imposters. That's everyone in our comments is complaining about the imposters, worrying about that. I'm going to throw this out. Go look at our report of the Orion glasses from last year, where Meta did not make time in their schedule for UploadVR to see these glasses firsthand. However, we followed through the first developer as they were doing their demo and had an in-depth report of their first hands-on with the Orion glasses. One of the things that they got to see in the Orion glasses was a Meta staffer represented as an avatar inside the glasses. And only through our reporting and me fact-checking with the writer of this did we reveal that Meta had changed its own internal policy and allowed a different member of the Meta staff to wear the avatar of another staffer. So we're looking at this image and all of our people are freaked out about the look of Mark Zuckerberg's hair being shown on an assortment of different faces and freaking out about the creepiness of it, right? Of the idea of someone else robbing their avatars. And the context, the last context I'm going to throw for handing this off to you is just Meta staff told us that they were going to be very careful as they were developing this technology not to misrepresent who is wearing an avatar to other people. So here in our report, we had Meta's own staff representing themselves as a different person than actually is appearing in the video. And the only way we did that was by the developer pointing out that your facial expressions that you're making look a little soft. They don't look like they're matching up really solidly with the expressions you're trying to make. So, like, here was a very skilled developer eyeing something that looked a little bit weird, us following up and then finding out that Meta has kind of like dropped that requirement of letting staff wear each other's faces if they want.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to a demo like that you're giving, this is something that they're obviously going to do, and they're not going to put roadblocks in place for authentication. But from the very first time that you reported on Codec avatars and you were talking to Yasser Sheikh, they talked about how this would be essential as a security method. And it's pretty obvious here what it's going to be. It's going to be your iris. The Apple Vision Pro has optic ID, just like Face ID on your iPhone scans your face, Touch ID uses your fingerprint, optic ID scans your iris, and you can only get into your Vision Pro like that, or you can put in a passcode. I think when it comes to these avatars being used in certainly public apps and things like that, they are probably just going to get this always behind your iris. If the iris that you are currently wearing the headset with does not match the avatar that you scanned your iris when you were creating it, they are not going to let you use it. It's as simple as that. So, this is probably going to be quite a lockdown system, just like personas on Vision Pro, for that obvious reason, because it would be a concern to be able to impersonate people. But again, this isn't something you can do on Quest 3. But if you have eye tracking hardware, as long as it's camera based, by its nature, you can do optic ID or whatever Meta ends up calling the same thing.
which so we've got one more of these meta research stories to do before we get to the sort of where is meta going next story that's spawned by their latest quarterly earnings. But you're pointing to the idea that meta needs to put hardware that meta controls inside of future VR headsets, and they're going to be the secure element inside of Horizon OS headsets in the future. And inside that secure element is your avatar and is your banking data and is everything else you sort of...
It's a good analogy. Like the same way you have the secure element on iPhone, and Qualcomm has an equivalent secure enclave, is it that Apple calls it? I can't remember, but Qualcomm has its equivalent. It's the same. It's the reason that you can use Apple Pay on your iPhone and Google Pay on your Android phone. It is possible to develop these things in a way that someone can't just impersonate your card, or in this case, your face. But it is going to require putting extra hardware in there. And I wonder how they will manage this on Quest 3. If they do the approach we've just talked about, the virtual webcam thing, when you can't verify, are you going to have to put in a passcode each time? Or are you...
That's what makes me believe they won't even pop up, right? You can't even do it. Like, how do you authenticate put on the headset right in front of you within the next 3 minutes. But like that, even that doesn't scan your iris. That doesn't confirm, right?
No, you're right. There's no way to do that on Quest 3. Maybe you could do some boondoggle of like hand ID, where you use computer vision to match the exact shape of your hand or something crazy like that. I don't think...
Put your fingerprints up in front of the headset. Let your confirm fingerprint. Yeah.
In theory, I guess. In theory, yeah. But I doubt it. Of course, it's... Well, this is what makes me think
VR download.
Maybe they just will wait. Maybe they'll just wait until they have feature hardware. A lot of people expect that there's all this pressure on Meta to ship codec avatars, so it must happen in Quest 3. I think maybe they just will make it a flagship feature of whatever the next headset is, and the headsets after that. It's been the same way that you can't do color mixed reality on Quest 2. Maybe you just can't do codec avatars on Quest 3.
I mean, this is for you, the audience, to make up your minds on this. I see little Scampy saying you can't trust any video anymore. AI already ruined all trust for the future. And I just, what you got to decide is, when these companies start suggesting solutions that cost money to those problems, do you remember that they also caused the problems, or that they at least played some part in causing the problems to begin with? That's up for you to decide and to think through. Let's talk about Meta and Stanford's thin holographic display that brings VR glasses closer to reality. I love this. This is going to be a little bit of a discussion subject for us, I expect.
Yeah, Guy Godin, the developer of Virtual Desktop, had just said there's no face tracking or eye tracking on Quest 3, David. Yeah, I'm very aware of that. I don't think I ever suggested that there was. The entire discussion was about the fact that there wasn't. Yeah, but let's talk about that next topic indeed. Let's talk about this research from Meta and Stanford on this thin holographic display. If I can get this to load, stand by. Because it is fascinating stuff, and it points towards a long-term future that we all want to get to eventually. So here is the image here. So let's do a little bit of background context. The primary cause, the overwhelmingly primary cause of the thickness of today's headsets, how offset they are from your eye, is the optical stack, the lenses and the displays. So in recent years, we've seen major progress on this. Yes, we've seen the move from refractive lenses like the Fresnel and aspheric lenses to pancake lenses that have a much shorter optical distance, this really improved thickness of headsets. And that's enabled everything from, Quest 3 to Apple Vision Pro to big screen beyond. Really impressive stuff. But it's still a lot thicker than glasses. And even something like your big screen beyond still sits out from your face quite a lot. And of course, so do full-fledged standalone headsets that use pancake lenses like Vision Pro or Quest 3. If you look at someone from the side, these headsets still protrude quite a lot. And so these obviously this limits fundamentally how light you ever could make the headset, no matter how much you try to shave off every gram. And it also means that the kind of moment of inertia is greater, the weight's more forward, it's more pulling down in your face. The ideal future that we all want to get to is, or maybe not us all, but a lot of us, is VR glasses, right? Something that would have this sort of form factor, no more cumbersome than wearing sunglasses, and yet capable of a full virtual reality experience. If you're saying, oh, but the periphery is open, you would have little clippers that go on the side that can block out the light when you want. It would be an option. Now, based on the current way that all of these headsets work, everything shipped from everyone, you would need quite clearly a fundamentally new approach to display and on optics to get there. And that's what this latest Meta and Stanford research is aiming towards. So this comes from two researchers from Meta's display systems research team, the same team that we talked about last week in relation to those ultra-wide field of view headsets, as well as an associate professor at Stanford and a Stanford PhD student who was supported by a Meta research fellowship. So the word holographic has many different meanings in this industry, and it's often misused and even abused, including by Mark Zuckerberg, who often uses it in a context where there is no reasonable possible technical reason to call it holographic. He calls AR glasses like Orion holographic, when absolutely no one in the technical side of this industry, not even his own researchers, would ever use that term. But to be clear, the prototype being presented here is a true holographic display that provides inherently realistic, truly 3D image with inherent depth cues. It is a truly holographic display. And it, by its nature, would not have the divergence accommodation conflict, which all shipping headsets have today. The discomfort your eyes feel because they're pointing towards the virtual distance to a virtual object, but actually focusing on the fixed focal distance of the lenses. So you get all of those advantages here. Let me see if I can bring an image that isn't loading up here as I described.
I'm seeing Gamertag VR out there in the comments. Thank you for tuning in for us today. And he's there are people asking, "Do you believe in VR?" And he's chanting the song of our people, VR. There was something, yeah, talking about wearing VR in public. It's interesting that, James, you're talking about, like, yes, I want them to be this small, but interestingly, part of the roadblock is a whole layer that David didn't discuss earlier in the software layer. Like, we did all that talking about the boundary system, but Apple Vision Pro reserves enough of its processing power for people detection such that you have settings as a user, 1, 2, 3, of letting people not show at all, letting them show through different apps, and then letting them show through all apps. And you have that setting as a user to pop people into your VR experience. And that is a game changer when it comes to long-term VR use and feeling comfortable in public with other people around you. You want that person to come up to you and you to suddenly go, "Oh, I'm sorry, hi, yeah, I want to interact with you real quick." You don't have that in the Quest ecosystem right now, and it's a big thing. All right, so David, what is going on here with this image?
Yeah, so this is the display system being presented by this research. Just to echo what you're saying, by the way, absolutely, that's vital, and I expect to see it in future Quest headsets when they have more leftover compute for computer vision to show people. Absolutely. But yeah, to get back to this, now that I've found the image, this is a fundamentally completely different approach to display than anything that's been shipped today. So this uses a tiny fiber coupled lasers for each color, red, green, and blue, which are steered by tiny, very fast mirrors, called MEMS mirrors for our technical audience, into an optical waveguide, which expands and guides the light back into a spatial light modulator, which then shapes it back into a holographic eyepiece in front of your eye. And all of this happens in just 3 millimeters. So you may be familiar with waveguides as the technology normally used for transparent AR systems like HoloLens, Magic Leap, Snap Spectacles, Meta's Orion prototype. But in this case, this is a slightly different type of waveguide that uses those waveguides use surface relief gratings, and this uses what's called volume Bragg gratings, VBGs. And essentially, this allows them to be kind of very specifically directed to a very narrow band of colors for each color at very specific angles. And so this, in this case, is an opaque VR style display system, but using waveguides. So it's an interesting approach. The other breakthrough here, that's kind of one of the main breakthroughs, is exactly how they designed this waveguide so that it could shape the light in the right way. But one other breakthrough is that they use AI calibration, a neural network that learned how the light changes as it passes through this entire complex yet thin system. So there's a lot going on here, and it means that the light is going to be sort of aberrated in all these kind of ways, and it's quite a complex system, even though it's in 3 millimeters. And so usually on all of the holographic systems that I've tried personally at many of these trade shows and industry events, the biggest issue is the image quality. And so they've made a breakthrough where this neural network has learned all of the ways that the light gets changed as it goes through this system, and thus it can correct it at the start such that the output is very high quality. So here is an example of when you use a traditional algorithm to try and combat this. On the left, kind of image quality. And I've seen something that looks like this. In fact, they actually use this damn parrot a lot, many times. I've seen this in person. I've talked to researchers who are very intelligent people working on amazing systems, and I wish them all the best of luck, but they're ready to show me their cool holographic display, and I see this on the left. I've seen it with my own eyes many times. Well, Meta is saying that their breakthrough AI calibration for holographic displays can get to this. And you can see here that there's still image quality artifacts, right? There's still kind of a little bit of speckle and color banding and things like that, and chromatic aberration. But if you look at the step forward here and you understand that the context here is that we're talking about the kind of systems that might ship in the late 2030s or early 2040s. That's the time scale we're talking about here, in my view. It's a very impressive step forward. So let me just contextualize this with the kind of progress so far. The first image I showed is actually from one of the first projects that's a fully integrated prototype of trying to get to a very thin display system. And you will have seen this back when it came out in 2020. This is from Facebook researchers, as it was called then. It was 9 millimeters, so compare that to the 3 millimeters. But this is only one color, only green, not full color. And the stated 18-gram weight did not include the laser backlight. You can kind of see in the image, if we go back to the one we're talking about today, these kind of laser backlights. So this didn't even include that. One of the real interesting breakthroughs that we covered was in 2022, sort of halfway between this and today, which was from NVIDIA researchers. They called theirs holographic glasses. And I want to be clear, this was not holographic in the sense of like 3D with depth, but NVIDIA's was. So this was a big step forward. And theirs is actually even thinner than what we're talking about today, 2.5 millimeters, with a true 3D holographic approach, a pupil replicating waveguide, a spatial light modulator, and geometric phase lens. So let's talk about, like, this is all very impressive, right? You're seeing these systems, wow, they've, got this thinness, they've kind of got to an acceptable image quality. What's the catch? Why is this not all shipping? Well, in addition to the extreme cost of these components, right? There is no commercial scale supply chain for high quality SLMs, fiber coupled lasers, and VBG waveguides. These things are all used in like research. They're not commercial scale. Nobody's figured out how to mass produce any of these things yet. In addition to that obvious point, there's something that you may not have seen in some other coverage of this, where these researchers, because they're contextualizing it to what came before, talked about their large field of view. So yes, compared to what came before, this NVIDIA system had a field of view of 23 degrees diagonal. This new Meta system, and Meta and Stanford, I should say, has a field of view of 38 degrees diagonal. So it's progress. You're seeing these holographic display systems get a little bit wider field of view, solve their image quality problems. The other thing is the eye box is a lot improved. The NVIDIA system was 2 millimeters without eye tracking or 8 millimeters with eye tracking. This is 8 millimeters just static without it. What I mean by eye box, it's the distance that your eye can move from the center of the lens and still have an acceptable image. If you own a VR headset, you know what it is. As you adjust the headset on your face, you're moving it so that your eye is centered with the lens. The area of kind of forgiveness, how much you can move your eye outside of the center of the lens, that's the eye box. You already know what this is if you own a headset. So that has to be good enough. I've tried a lot of prototypes of all kinds of display systems where the eye box sucks. And why does that matter? Well, it means that you have to get your eye perfectly in position. And if the headset shifts even a millimeter on your head, the image quality's gone. It's all blurry. The other thing is, maybe if it doesn't have the right kind of adjustment, you can never get your eyes into position. Good example of this is PlayStation VR 2. It has a very small eye box. You have to make sure your eyes are perfect. So
And depend on the content, right? If you want to play a lot of games that move fast and your eye box is small, you're kind of screwed because the eye box is always shaking past your eyes
yes.
when you're moving. All those considerations fill it into this. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's a very valid point. Like if you get it perfect and you keep your head still, yeah, you're fine. But in the real world, you're going to be, moving around your virtual world, playing an active game or social VR or whatever. It's a very, very valid point. So to kind of sum this all up, what are we seeing here? We're seeing
Devin asking, is iBox interchangeable with sweet spot? Would you say the iBox allows you to see the sweet spot?
So, well, some people use the term sweet spot slightly differently. The iBox is the technical term, kind of. The issue with sweet spot is some people use it to mean iBox. Yes. Others use it to mean the area of clarity. So the area of clarity is once you're in the iBox, how much of the lens is clear. So if your eye was perfectly centered with the lens, and you had a tiny eye box, you could theoretically have a tiny eye box and a very wide area of clarity. Or you could have, a very large eye box, but even when you're in the right position, it's not both. So they're like the pancake lenses that you see in Quest 3, for example, are amazing because they have both a very wide eye box. So even if you adjust the IPD wrong, it's fine. You're still in the eye box. And you have a very large area of clarity, right? Most of the lens is clear. With something like Quest 2 or 3S, I'd say you have a decent eye box. It's not, as good as Quest 3, but it's decent. And then a mediocre area of clarity, right? The outside the lens, it's quite blurry. PlayStation VR 2, very small eye box, very large area of clarity within the eye box. So all of these things are trade-offs. But just to kind of bring this all back and sum it up in a wider context, what we are seeing here is a steady year-by-year progression of what will probably be the kind of eventual end game for VR displays, truly holographic displays that use probably waveguides like AR glasses, but slightly different waveguides to get to the thinness that you would ideally want and deliver these amazing magical form factors and the headsets that we all dream of, where it really is just like wearing sunglasses and you could be in them for as long as you want. But we're nowhere near those shipping. I want to be crystal clear, but they're making steady progress. So nobody can predict the future. I'm sure I'll sound stupid at some point saying this, but if I had to guess, as I said before, you're talking late 2030s, early 2040s when it comes to when do these things actually get ready for product. Obviously, nobody can predict the future on that scale. This is my estimation by watching the progress of this over the past kind of decade and seeing the rate of it. There could be a breakthrough tomorrow that makes this all wrong. But even when there is, you'll have to scale up a supply chain. But we're not even at the stage where this is like, the tech is ready. We just need a supply chain. It's not like Orion, the AR glasses prototype where, if they could ship it at scale, they would. If you couldn't ship, a 38-degree field of view VR headset with this kind of image quality issue, it wouldn't be practical, and you can't because all of these components are very hard to make and aren't at scale. But promising, and what are we all here for? We're all here to talk about what is the future, where is this going? Some people have this very flawed idea that these 500-gram, very thick headsets that we have today are inherently what VR is and it will never change. They are very wrong. It is very clear that we will one day get to this form factor, but no time soon.
Well, a lot of things for me to think about there. I'm wondering what the architecture is inside of the headsets that Anduril is building for the U.S. Army. and whether they are superior in any way to this design here. Um, and if they are, why is Meta still building these designs if they've been outclassed by a competitor or a future partner, another headset manufacturer building these types of designs? Yeah, just want to throw that idea out there. A lot of interesting things to discuss in the comments. One person was discussing they want us to put these headsets on our heads. We do put them on our heads from occasion. SIGGRAPH is coming up. Are you going to be able to make it to SIGGRAPH?
Yeah, Ian's just back in case anyone's wondering. I am indeed going to SIGGRAPH, and they are showing not this, as far as I'm aware, but they are showing very ultra wide field of view in a relatively compact form factor, like same as Quest 3 roughly. They are also showing a very high resolution and very high brightness in a single headset. So I'm excited to try those both.
Ooh, high resolution, high brightness together is going to be a good one. We did high brightness in the past, and that was a powerful effect. If you haven't experienced this, right? You have not done this in a VR headset. You might have seen a sense of this slightly in PlayStation VR 2 with its dynamic range, but you're talking about looking into. We've got a studio light. David has a simulation of a studio light here in the studio. That is pointed at us, but there's no actual real light coming off of it that I can tell. When you looked at a studio light that was rendered inside of this headset, the brightness beaming out of the light looks as bright as a real studio light does in a real studio. And it has an effect of clicking your brain over and going, "Oh, I'm not actually in virtual reality. I'm in reality." Like, we have the sense of the last 10 years that virtual reality is cartoons. And we all there's plenty of people that have actually ejected themselves from this industry because they're sick of the cartoons so much. They can't wait for it to get this good. I want to come back to this architecture thing, David, of you putting this on decades of progress, right? And that's so hard for me to think about. Like, we spend hours debating it privately, and then we spend hours in this studio discussing the product plans with you. But what David is pointing out in this whole section is just the manufacturing to make VR headsets that give you higher resolution, more brightness, higher dynamic range, better placement of your focus, depending on where you're pointing your eyes, have it all be realistic and give you all those cues. All that stuff is going to require decades of improvement, as well as manufacturing to match and build out those headsets to do the things that we want them to do. Are we going to get that out of AR glasses? Meta wants us to believe that we're going to get them out of the other architecture. There's hours of David and I debating that in the past. But this is remarkable to think we could have 20 years ahead of us before we achieve 110 degrees field of view, or even 90 or 70 degrees field of view, because the advantage here is you can see out the sides, right? Really easily on these designs. What is the perfect field of view here? And are we going to, it's fun to imagine. What's frustrating for me, David, is I thought VR was going to take off in 2018, 2016, 2014. We thought it was all going to take off on these things. But now we're at this moment in time where every headset is about the same. It's a big, bulky brick on your face. And they've all got the same optical sensor, fixed focus. And now we're going to work from this beginning point of, let's shave off a little bit of weight, packing on a little bit more power. Let's just do this every 2 years into a whole nother decade, right? That's going to take a long time. And this is all leading, remember, I don't know, a year ago, I was like, can we ever get a Vision Pro Max that is $10,000 and uses this kind of design? Is that a feasible thing? Once we have a minimum viable market for Vision Pro and Vision Air, all of that exists. Then can we get a super high-end $10,000 line? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. Firstly, I think, when you come to this musing on, you thought VR was going to quote unquote take off at this point or this point. I think the industry as a whole massively underestimated how important form factor is, weight and thickness. And so people are very sensitive to weight on their sinuses and having pressure against their face. And if something is uncomfortable, you're not going to want to do it, right? It's not a good pitch for a product to wear this thing that will literally make your face hurt. That's part of, we'll get into that discussion of where Meta is soon, but that's something that has to be taken into account. And I think now the industry does understand. Big Screen is an example of a company that understands this very well. We understand now that Meta and Pico are going to have this form factor as a primary focus for their next headset, trying to get to as thin and light as possible by, for example, taking the compute and battery off the headset and into a compute puck. But I see a lot of people in the comments, and you, of course, asking, is there room for, something between the pancake lenses of today and these crazy holographic optics that are probably, 15 years at minimum out. And I want to come back to what I see James in the audience bringing up, is that Meta has shown off such an architecture. And interestingly, it has one commonality with this. So if I show the full version of the chart from earlier, you see the old refractive lenses we had on our Quest 2 and I guess on our Quest 3S's today, which we'll talk about. And then the pancake lenses we have on our Big Screen Beyonds and Apple Vision Pros and Quest 3s. But one of the issues with pancake lenses is that while they do allow for at the kind of displays that are used in Quest 3 and the kind of pancake lenses, while they do allow for a thinner headset, they actually have not allowed for a lighter headset. So Quest 3 feels lighter than Quest 2, but it's physically not. It's roughly the same weight. And one of the reasons behind that, there are multiple, but one of them is that the pancake lens itself actually has to be thicker and heavier, ironically. So the lens is thicker and heavier, but allows for a thinner headset, as you can quite clearly see in this great diagram. But Meta did show off something that is between the pancake lenses of today, the mid-2020s, and the exotic holographic optics that I predict will not arrive until, in shipping mass market products until the late 2030s at least. And that was holokick lenses. And they are not like a true 3D holographic with, full like light field depth cues, but they do incorporate some of the ideas, one of them being a laser backlight. So to ship this kind of holokick lens that Meta has talked about, and I see James bringing up that Meta has talked about building a fully integrated prototype with the holokick lenses called Mirror Lake, you would need to use a laser backlight. So that's a supply chain that would need to be built up, but it's only one. Remember, I'm talking about this crazy holographic system that you wouldn't even want to ship today because it's 38 degrees, but you'd need, these VBG waveguides, these crazy advanced high quality SLMs and the laser backlights. Well, with holokick lenses, you would need the laser backlight part. So that's the kind of difficult part. The holographic pancake lens, that's not difficult for Meta to make. It also, they could theoretically have electronic varifocal by having multiple stacks of them, but they're just a thin holographic lens. This part, they can do this if they want. Getting a laser backlight is the challenge. But I don't think it's crazy to say that in the late 2020s or early 2030s, at minimum, we will start to see new optics like this arrive, optics that aren't just pancake lenses in front of a display. And that's where you can start to get thinner and lighter headsets that do approach the kind of form factor that you want and allow you to, by the nature of how thin it is, reduce weight. And these holographic pancake lenses, these holokick lenses, whatever you want to call them, they would be quite light by their nature as well. So, it's not that we have to be stuck with pancake lenses in front of regular displays until we get to true holographic waveguides. It is probably the case that there will be this intermediate technology as Meta has been kind of talking about. And I think there is, you're talking about when it comes to these eventual holographic displays, there is a commonality, which is they're slightly different waveguides, but fundamentally, we're probably going to be in a world where waveguides are the fundamental underlying lens technology for VR and AR. And that doesn't mean that they're going to converge into one product, but it does mean that there will be manufacturing and supply chain commonality between the kind of holographic VR optics we're talking about and AR glasses.
Mm. The critical thing that sort of is in my mind is, right, does the headset do something for me that I need, right? Something that I need for my career, for my school, And the answer has been no in the MetaQuest ecosystem for a very long time. Um, and here, Apple Vote Vision Pro shipped was last year, and the answer was yes for some people who use that headset. Even though for many people, like it didn't cross the threshold, right? Not enough power to do actual coding tasks directly on the device. Some other limitations, but it's right at the cusp. But you can imagine everything that comes after. A Vision Pro 2 with slightly more powerful chip can maybe do those things and bridge that gap. And then you start cutting the weight and doing all the things like removing the eyesight display and putting another display out there that's much cheaper, or shaving weight off the headset in various creative ways to just bring this overall thing down while pumping in more power each new generation of chip that you put inside of this thing. And then, benefiting all your other devices with it. iPhone will benefit from all the things that are getting put into new generations of Vision Pro, all that stuff. Apple is spinning up now. And what kills me is, as we transfer to this last section, it's just, I feel like people underestimate Apple's ability to keep a secret when they want to, even though many secrets have leaked. And Meta at the same time keeping a secret, even though previous ones have leaked, right? Maybe they've learned from the past, but my point, Google at the same time, my point is, I think we could be in for surprises as these companies try to prove that there is a mass market VR product here in the near future. It just needs the right price and mixture of all these features that we've already had. They're just not at the right price.
Yeah, I agree with all you're saying about VR. I question Meta's ability to keep a secret. Apple, I'll give it to you, historically could keep a secret, but it seems that Mark Gurman, specifically at Bloomberg, some of his reporting over the past year, he has been reporting on meetings between the top 20 people at Apple. I don't even want to speculate on how he's doing that. I don't want to end up, being accused of accusing him of something. I have no idea how he does it, but clearly Apple's culture of
And
secrecy.
so good sourcing, you wonder how he gets it, right? Like,
Yeah, I'm saying, how on earth do you, like, he reported on a meeting of the top 20 executives at Apple before what they were talking about became public. How did he do that? I don't know. I'm genuinely not going to speculate. I would get myself into trouble if I speculate, but yeah. I think what you're saying, though, in a wider context, brings us very nicely onto our final topic, which is that as Ray-Ban Meta glasses sales skyrocket, Quest headset sales are down again. So what do I mean by that? So this week, Meta reported its Q2 2025 earnings to its investors. That's its quarter two, the second quarter of the year earnings. And since late 2020, Meta has broken out the figures for its Reality Labs division, Reality Labs being its metaverse and wearables division, the division behind Quest, Ray-Ban Meta, Horizon OS, Horizon Worlds, and of course the research and development of AR glasses, future display smart glasses, the neural wristband, Codec avatars. All of this is in Meta's Reality Labs division. So this is a division that is still very much so in its early stages. It is something that Mark Zuckerberg has described as being a multi-decade effort. Again, we're on this show VR Download where we're not talking about how everything relates on a month-to-month scale, or that if something hasn't taken off in a year, it's dead. We're talking about an entirely new computing paradigm in the scale of decades, and that's what Meta's Reality Labs is focused on too. So its revenues are quite tiny compared to the overall Meta. They are only like 2 to 3% of Meta's overall earnings, but they do show us the success of Meta's current early products in VR, MR, and smart glasses. And so this quarter, Q2 2025, they did bring in 5% more than they brought in last quarter. For context, we always compare quarter to quarter between years, not consecutive, because these kind of products are very seasonal. As you can see very clearly here, they always get the highest on Q4, Christmas, the holiday season. And you can often see that there's a very seasonal pattern to this. So that's how companies always compare revenue anyway for these reasons. They call it year over year. You compare same quarter this year to last year. So in Q1, as we talked about at the time on this show, we saw that something has gone very wrong at Reality Labs in terms of its market success and position. While Q4 2024, the holiday season, was their biggest ever, and they confirmed that the Quest 3S was a big part of this. In Q1, it was actually lower than 2024 by 6%. And at the time, Meta's CFO, Chief Financial Officer, Susan Lee, told investors that this was due to reduced sales of Quest headsets and partially offset by increased sales of Ray-Ban Meta glasses. Well, now in Q2 2025, they are up, but Susan Lee told investors this time essentially the same thing, that the increase was due to the sales of Ray-Ban Meta glasses and partially offset by lower Quest sales. So the Ray-Ban Meta glasses are doing the accelerating and Quest sales are actually dragging them down. And earlier this week, EssilorLuxottica, the company that owns Ray-Ban and Oakley and is Meta's partner that we talked about recently, Meta has taken a €3 billion, 3% investment in. So Meta owns part of it now, this giant eyewear company. They had their own earnings call. And they told their investors that sales of Ray-Ban Meta in the first half of 2025 are triple that of the first half of 2024. And they said, you know, if the CEO told investors that this is one of the things they're happiest about, he specifically said they're performing exceptionally well in the market. Susan Lee, Meta's CFO, told investors, this was last night, I was reporting on this, I was on the call listening as a listen-only participant, of course, but that she told them that demand for the most popular SKUs of Ray-Ban Meta is still outstripping the supply, despite the company increasing production earlier this year. And in response to the concerns around that, she was saying that we're working to ramp supply to better meet consumer demand later this year for the Ray-Ban Meta. So Meta is in this situation where they are selling the Ray-Ban Meta glasses faster than they can make them, whereas Quest 3S is selling less than Meta was selling of Quest 2 and Quest 3 last year. So when Meta's lineup was just Quest 2 and Quest 3, they were selling more Quest headsets than when today with Quest 3S. So what's happened here? Quite clearly, Quest 3S, and Meta actually hinted at this at GDC, Meta's director of games, Chris Pruitt. Quest 3S has had a very different sales pattern to every Quest in the past. Meta specifically said this at GDC. It has had a massive sales surge over Christmas as a Christmas gift, but then into the year after Christmas, it's not selling as just a regular product throughout the year. So it's more so than any Meta headset in the past, a seasonal product that people have decided, sure, I'll get it for my kid for Christmas, or myself, or my partner, you know, my husband, my wife, whatever, my brother, my sister for Christmas. But I don't, throughout the year, I'm not going to go and buy that for myself. It's quite clearly what's happened here. So, we'll talk about all of the kind of implications of that. But we understand, like we recently reported on Meta's plan to Meta's move to cancel the two leading candidates for a 2026 Quest 4 and instead accelerate a lightweight headset with a tethered compute puck that may be around $1,000. That was in the wake of the Q1 results. And I think they're going to be more sure of that plan in the wake of the Q2 results. The one positive thing I would say here about Quest, though, before we all get horribly depressed, is that Mark Zuckerberg again told investors that retention and overall users and usage is up. So as I said at the start of the show when introducing this topic, we're now in this upside down world, the opposite of the situation we were in the Quest 2 era. In the Quest 2 era, Meta's problem was that retention was struggling. People were buying a Quest 2, but they then shelved it. Now we're in this era where retention is up. People are using their Quest 3S. More and more people are using it. Meta recently said that more people are actively in the Quest ecosystem today than ever before, active users. That is the case, right? It went up 30% in 2024. It's currently still at its highest. So there actually are more people using their Quest. But now the struggle is the opposite. Not enough people are buying the Quest 3S and Quest 3 in the first place. It's a very weird situation to be in, given that so much of our industry's discourse focused on the exact opposite throughout the Quest 2 era. And so if you want to look at this in kind of a bull case, a positive outlook, you could say that Quest 2 was oversold. There was too much, aggressive selling of Quest to people who never really would have ended up using it because it just wasn't good enough yet. Whereas Quest 3S is being sold to fewer people, but because it's better, right? You've got the color pass through, the higher fidelity graphics, the better controllers without those rings that you smash together, and all of the software improvements. That is meaning that people actually use the damn thing more. So fascinating situation to be in, and I think. Like you still have, even with that positive aspect, you have to look at the bad, right? That doesn't outweigh the fact that they're selling fewer Quests this year. That's bad. And that's clearly why they have reevaluated their hardware strategy. But if you're all optimism, you need to take into account that it's a very bad thing that they're selling fewer headsets. If you're all pessimism, you need to take into account that it's positive, that they're actually seeing a healthy market of real usage.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get going here in a minute. I want to say thank you to our audience for tuning in, for sticking with us through the years and through these episodes through the summer months when it's hot. Time traveling with us, our patrons for supporting us over on UploadVR.com. It means the world to us to get your direct support. Thank you to our podcast listeners out there. I want to talk about this chart here real quick before I sign off. David, when did the Quest 3 ship on this chart? That's the first... quarter.
Yep, that's Quest 3.
Is which quarter?
Sorry?
Well, Quest 3S shipped which?
Here on. So this green is Quest 3, this green is Quest 3S.
All right. So those are the 2 quarters when Meta shipped its last 2 headsets. And the context I want to add here for anyone thinking about this at home is for the quarters prior to them launching the 3S or the 3, we knew that the 3 was coming. They telegraphed pretty widely this is what's coming. Not only that I believe we had in our reporting that their next headset is going to be even cheaper than this one. So we've told audience through this entire period, and not just us, everyone has told their audience exactly what Meta is doing with its next 2 devices. And the next one is a $500 3, the next one is a low-cost 3S, and it's actually a step backward. So you have, and then here is what Q2, is that when the Vision Pro ships? Right around there.
Yeah, Q1. But
so Q1 2024 is when the Vision Pro ships. So from here to here, the conversation and the recommendations that we give for whether you get a VR headset or don't get more complicated. If you come up to a Quest owning person or a Vision Pro owning person and say, "Is now the time right? Is now the right time to get a VR headset?" You say no. Wait for the next gen. These are actually really good, but you need to wait a little bit longer for these to get a little bit more powerful. That's true of the Quest 3S. It's true of the Vision Pro. Both of us look at this and go, you need to wait a little bit for all these things to get more powerful. And I think it's critical. Like we all complained during this period about the step backward in Fresnel lenses, right? Here's Meta going, we're always putting new technologies. We're always pushing the limits. Here's the best we can do in a package. Oh no, we're actually taking a giant step back visually in what we're providing you at a lower form factor. It has an effect of keeping out the competition, but it also hurts anyone who really wanted to invest in VR these last 2 years. If you wanted the best VR headset, you're like, am I getting a Beyond? Am I getting an Index? Am I getting a Quest 3S? And then outfitting it? Am I getting a Quest 3? It's not, it doesn't sell well. It doesn't make an interesting package. But all this is to say, here we are coming into the future of the end of 2025, and then we've got 2026 over there at the end of this. And people are talking about Deckard. People are talking about Android XR. People want those other Apple headsets. And I think it's universal to kind of say, actually, like I bought the Quest 3S Xbox edition for myself with my paycheck, and I'm not getting reimbursed by UploadVR for it. I just wanted to have it, to know what it was like. and to experience it, even though it's not a great system that we cannot recommend a single other person to buy. It's like what I'm seeing is 3 years of development here where like I'm frustrated. I got to put this in context of everything else. Wasn't it back here when the Quest Pro launched around
in this one, Q4
So
2022?
Q4 2022, Meta invites me to their research headquarters, and that's when they show me the best they can do with codec avatars. With all the restrictions that we talked about earlier in our show, they show me a PC-based avatar with real-time conversation that is impressive right there at the launch of the Quest Pro, which cost, what was it, $1,500? Dismal failure. And at the time, I'm looking at this whole thing going, why can't I go put the Quest Pro on and have the codec avatar demo you're giving me in a different room? The whole thing felt like a big whiff, a big miss. Meta wasn't ready to ship the technologies in their research division inside of their consumer hardware back in 2022. And it's been 3 or 4 years. They've had plenty of time to right that wrong. 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. When are they going to ship these things that they showed off years ago as being revolutionary? And if they're not shipping it in a timely fashion, what does that say about their commitment to the Horizon OS platform by other partners? Because isn't it other partners now that need to build the hardware to ship these bigger technologies? Like, they need to come to a partner at this precise time that they're expecting other industry companies to ship Horizon OS headsets. Those companies need to be shipping with really great eye tracking, really great face tracking, and not cutting corners on those things while Meta is supplying them with the software to do these codec avatars. When do they get their act together and actually ship this thing is a really, really fascinating question relative to what the next, Apple headsets and Android headsets do.
Yeah, fascinating thoughts there. I think there's been this huge focus, and we've been.
I got to go, David.
Sure,
Thank you.
sure.
Thank you to our audience. I'll see you guys later.
Thanks. Good to have you back. Hopefully, we can have you here in the next week. I'm pretty sure we can. But yeah. Apologies for the short interruption there, folks. Those are some very interesting thoughts from Ian. And I think how I want to relate this back to a wider context is that I think there's been this huge focus in the industry in recent years, and kind of always from Meta, on price and cost as being this imagined primary bottleneck. And in some ways, of course it is, right? The average person cannot afford to spend thousands of dollars on a headset and doesn't want to. But this is a kind of, you can't just look at one dimension of this. And I think sometimes we've been guilty of this, and I think Meta is too. What matters is what is delivered for the price. What is the value? People spend thousands of dollars on a holiday or vacation, as Americans would say, because it delivers something that is important enough to them. People spend thousands of dollars on a car because it transports them every day. On the release of Oculus Go, the instance where I think everyone, including Meta, agrees that they went too far in cost cutting and not shipping enough value and features. Palmer Luckey released an interesting blog post called "Free Isn't Cheap Enough." And he argued that if you give everyone on Earth today a free Oculus Go, or even a free Oculus Rift and a PC to use it, most of them would stop using it after a few weeks. So, but in contrast, in the other extreme, if you had a, full dive VR system that was like something out of, Sword Art Online or Black Mirror that you could just tap to the side of your head and be in perfect VR, people would spend thousands and thousands of dollars on it, and it would be a mass market product, even if it cost $10,000, right? If it literally felt entirely real, and you could go into whatever virtual environment, people would take out a mortgage for it, right? So there is this continuum, this spectrum of price and value, and the entire thesis of the Quest 3S was that the only problem with Quest 3 was just its price, and you could release the old Fresnel lenses all over again, basically the same display and lenses as Quest 2, and that would in itself be enough to replicate the success of Quest 2. Because notice in this chart, here's Quest 2's launch quarter, the first green bar you see here. Look at the next year, Q4. It actually did better a year after. Isn't that fascinating? So the same thing happened with Q1 and Q2. These were bigger quarters. The headset wasn't just selling well out of the gate, and it wasn't just selling better at Christmas. It was actually selling well as a product throughout the year. So you have to kind of wonder, even if you do have, I'm not saying don't make a Quest 3S at all. I'm not saying that. But at some point, let me think of a good analogy for this. NVIDIA has all of its marketing and hype around its highest end graphics card, the 5090, whatever it happens to be each generation. Everyone wonders what's going to be improved in the 6090. But go and look at the Steam hardware survey. Almost nobody actually buys the 5090. If you're a PC gaming enthusiast, this might surprise you. Most people buy the 60 tier or the 70 tier. And that may sound very surprising to you. Almost, look at the Steam hardware survey if you don't believe me. It's all listed there. Almost nobody actually buys it, but the hype and the interest and the appeal and the desire is generated around the high end, even though there's a full spectrum of products. In the same way, you could imagine something like this applying to VR. If the only kind of meta offering is this kind of low end, stripped down as much as possible, $300 to $500 option, even though that is what most people can afford, that means that you miss out on the word of mouth and the desire and the developer interest and wider cultural interest that you get by also having a high end offering. So I think that's kind of an interesting analogy to apply here. And so I see some people in the audience asking, wouldn't it have just been better to reduce the price of Quest 3 instead of releasing a Quest 3S? That's a very interesting thesis. You got to wonder, do the supply chain specifics allow for that? But it seems like if that was possible, what was the capital expenditure of launching Quest 3S, from all of the specifics of molds and things like that, all the way to the new marketing and the kind of costs that are the fixed costs that are involved in creating a new headset, even though it's kind of a mashup of old parts, versus spending that same money to reduce the price of Quest 3 or subsidize Quest 3 further. That's an interesting one. So I wonder if there's an issue of appeal here in general. Now, this could also be down to software, right? It could be down to content. It could be down to the fact that there just isn't the kind of content that people want. And all of everything I'm just saying could also be not irrelevant. It could just be that these are wider cultural factors, that people are spending less time on kind of highly immersive things like going to the cinema and having a virtual reality experience, and even consoles that are seeing some of these same issues, and more time scrolling TikTok and Instagram reels. And that's how people are spending their money and their time. It could be macroeconomic factors that are affecting people's wider spending, inflation and cost of living, that makes people more reluctant to buy something that is, an entertainment device. But coming back to what Ian said, when it comes to something like the Apple Vision Pro, while a lot of this does come down to its high price, it's more than just, an entertainment device. It can actually be practically useful in your life. And he talks about when will Codec avatars ship? Something we've talked about before. Well, when your headset becomes a truly useful telecommunications device, does that make it more valuable? When we do get to form factors that let you take this on a plane and have your giant virtual cinema screen without having a 500-gram brick on your face, does that make it more important? This is a very complicated topic, but the only kind of takeaway I want to give here is that even if you do have these macroeconomic factors, it's quite clear that they're not affecting the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, triple the sales. What would you like? How would you interpret this if you're Meta? Do you think they're going to do the same thing as before? A lot of people are saying, they just want a Quest 4 that's the same thing again. It's Quest 2, Quest 1 to Quest 2 to Quest 3. They doubled the computing power, the GPU at least, double. With Quest 2, they got a higher resolution. With Quest 3, it was a biggest upgrade ever. The controllers are so much nicer without those big rings. The pancake lenses are a generational leap. It's color pass through. It's a better headset. It's a true generational leap. The people that say, "Oh, Quest 3 wasn't a big upgrade over Quest 2," I don't know what you're smoking, because I've tried a bunch of headsets and I can't see how you couldn't think that's a big leap. But clearly, that's not enough. It's enough for to bring back the kind of to rebound over the loss that was incurred by Quest 2's crazy price increase, and it's kind of coming into its later aspect of life when it was already kind of outdated on the market. But it's not enough to see growth. Meta is investing tens of billions of dollars in this. They want to see this grow. And we do have to put this into the long-term context that they aren't going to pull the plug tomorrow. I'm not suggesting they're going to pull out of VR like some people say. They still haven't even shipped some of the fundamental foundational technologies. They don't even have eye tracking for gaze and pinch. They haven't delivered, a lightweight open periphery headset for media and screens. They don't have 4K per eye. They're not going to give up. But I do think that this informs their strategy and makes them have a think about just doing the same thing over and over again. It's that, cliche quote about the definition of madness. It doesn't make sense, the quote, but it's useful in this context to bring it up, because why would Meta do the same thing over again? Why would you look at these stats in the rest of the year? Sure, you get these big revenues here, but some of this will be affected by Ray-Ban Meta. But why would they see decreasing sales after launching new hardware and then kind of come back? Now, maybe you could argue that maybe their cycles aren't aggressive enough. Maybe they should have a new Quest every year, maybe every 2 years instead of every 3. But I can understand why Meta would look at this and go, maybe we need a fundamentally different approach, or maybe we need to wait until there's an even bigger generational leap before we put out a Quest 4. And that's disappointing for people who want that. And obviously, if you're a VR enthusiast in this industry, you don't care about what Meta wants financially or as a market size. You just want a better hardware. I understand that. You're like, maybe some of the things I'm saying, you're like, I don't care. Like, why do I care what Meta's spreadsheets look like? Sure, valid. But I'm explaining to you the causes and thinking and reasoning that Meta might be putting in when it comes to this. And the reason that that's interesting for you, perhaps, is that it might inform when you do expect to see a new headset of a certain kind. But one of the things we just have to say here as well, I want to bring up a comment from Rudel here, which says, I agree, comfort, weight, bulk, and heat are just not good enough for mass adoption. Yeah, I think we are not, no headset today is good enough to go mainstream. It just isn't. People that think the hardware is good enough, you're wrong. It isn't for the average person. It's amazing compared to what we had 15 years ago. But it's not good enough. It's too heavy. It's not powerful enough. Even the best developers that have the most amazing low-level graphics techniques, like Population 1 and Red Matter 2 and Batman Arkham Shadow and such, they can pull off decent graphics on Quest 3 that are good enough. But the average developer that is just working with Unity and has, can't go down to the custom shaders and custom, occlusion system and all the kind of crazy stuff that Batman Arkham Shadow implemented, they can't deliver graphics that are actually good enough for most people, and it's not appealing yet. And there's so many things we can bring up here. Meta's marketing is obviously a factor too. You could argue that, as I saw someone in the comments earlier, Quest 2 era marketing was just better than current Meta marketing. It's weird and ironic that Meta, a company that delivers many of the world's ads and has, constantly increasing ad targeting. I'm in this earnings call yesterday, and I want to be clear about this. This is Meta's Reality Labs. When it comes to Meta as a company overall, their stock is up, their revenue's up, their profits up. It's all up. The wider company, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and Messenger, they're all seeing record revenue and stuff. So Meta's not in any dire situation. They can support this for as long as Mark Zuckerberg personally wants. Mark Zuckerberg is very much so in charge of the company. He has a controlling stake. He can do this for as long as he wants. But it's quite clear that however you want to diagnose this, everyone will have their pet theory. And I see many in the comments of exactly what's gone wrong. Is it marketing? Is it that the hardware isn't good enough? Is it, some people say, price is still the problem? Like, you can buy a tablet on Amazon for 50 quid. You can um, buy, a robot vacuum for 150. People maybe expect things to be cheaper. Maybe it actually is the price. I could be on a completely wrong tangent here. Maybe you do just need a Quest 3S like device that's $150 instead of 300. That's something that could be possible too. But what's clear, regardless of what theory you want to latch onto, it's clear that something has gone wrong on the hardware side for the headsets. But I do want to bring up the counter side of that, which is the glasses. So, we're talking about the headsets. That's what interests most people here, but we cannot ignore the fact that the glasses sales have tripled. They are skyrocketing. They are selling them faster than they can make them. So if you were a skeptic of the idea of smart glasses without a display, I don't mean in this rude way, but it's quite clear that you were wrong. It is clear that at least for now, there is massive consumer desire for smart glasses with AI. It is quite obvious why Google is entering this space. They've taken their investment in Gentle Monster. They're working with Warby Parker and another eyewear company as well. Multiple reports suggest Apple is going to enter this space. There are dozens of startups in this space. I think we will see, a lot of new products from Meta here. They've just launched the Oakley Meta Houston glasses. I've learned how to pronounce it, Oakley Meta Houston, which people have just started receiving the limited edition, and apparently the video quality is better because it's 3K now, and the camera is just slightly better. So it'll be fascinating to see this year when Meta launches its Celeste glasses, the ones with a small monocular HUD and the neural wristband. How well does that do? We're in the early days of smart glasses, so Meta learned quite quickly with Quest Pro that there was no market for a $1,500 headset that was just a slightly better Quest 2. Will they find out whether or not there is a market for smart glasses that basically build on the Ray-Ban Meta by adding a small display and having a better camera and having the neural wristband, but are $1,000 to $1,500? It's going to be a very interesting experiment. That will inform Meta's decision making very much so too. It is a company that learns from these price experiments about what the market wants, and we're not going to be in that for smart glasses. So we are, what is it now, 6 or 7 weeks away from Meta Connect 2025. We expect it to be very focused around these Meta Celeste HUD glasses and the neural wristband, and we don't expect that there will be a headset at the moment. So if your argument is that Meta just needs to move faster with Quest and release more and more iterations and go further and further, then we're not going to see that happen, I don't think, unfortunately. Craig Melville is saying, I don't understand why smart glasses sit within Reality Labs and not the super AI team. I guess that's an interesting question. So the AI software is done by Meta's new superintelligence team that comprises of their kind of core models team that they're spending billions of dollars to acquire people for, and then obviously the product team. But the hardware and integration is done by Reality Labs because they are the metaverse and wearables team. So they're doing the hardware. There's not a lot of overlap between people who are like fundamental AI researchers and AI model engineers and people who are very good at making advanced consumer electronics. So they work together, absolutely, but Reality Labs is the hardware aspect. Yeah. I think a lot of people are expressing skepticism about whether there's a market for $1,000, maybe $1,500 smart glasses, even with a small display. I don't want to make predictions here because I don't know. I think the big what if for me is the monocular aspect, but I mean, it's quite clear that the intuition about smart glasses from a lot of people is not reliable, given we were told by so much of the tech industry that nobody wanted these, and by a lot of the kind of tech enthusiasts that, no normal people would never wear a Meta camera and buy that for $300 to $500 and wear it around proudly. The answer is that that's wrong. They clearly do. We have, as of February, it was 2 million Ray-Ban Meta glasses sold. We don't know what that number is now. We do know that EssilorLuxottica is scaling up to 10 million per year by the end of 2026. And I've seen these things in the real world. I think I mentioned this when I came back last week. I was at a concert and saw multiple people walk past with them. I was on a train and the person sitting across from me had Ray-Ban Meta glasses. I've seen them walking down the street. A friend of mine, completely not of my suggestion, this is a friend I hadn't spoken to in quite a while, actually, I caught up with, and they told me, I'd never spoken to them about smart glasses before. They told me that they'd bought a pair from their father because their father was really interested in them. And so they got them for Father's Day, I think. This is like becoming quite a normal thing now, I think. So, yeah. I think people are pointing out that these are quite separate markets. Yeah, very much so. But they're obviously, over time, you're going to see one grow up and one grow down. So the headsets, I'm trying to find the right image for this. I really hope I can find it. The headsets are going to, scale down in form factor and try to get to be more wearable, more appealing, more aesthetic, more practical. And meanwhile, the glasses are going to grow up by getting more and more features, more display capabilities, and they're not going to converge. Absolutely, they're not going to converge anytime soon. That's decades off. But it will be interesting to see when we get to a stage of slim and light visor-like headsets that are very well optimized for giant virtual cinema screens and triple monitor productivity, and we get eventual waveguide AR glasses that can do, AR and virtual screens. What will be the market preference there? Still so early in this. I want to really highlight that a lot of this focus today has been on near-term stuff, but we are still so early and the game hasn't really started yet. We're not in the end game. We're still in the start part. We are not going to know the answers to a lot of these questions until we see what the market chooses, but you can see you can see the starting position, and it is that image I had up before. God, sorry, this is difficult to bring up images while talking. That image I had up before. This is the starting position where, to me, Quest 3 is the first headset that is remotely good enough for the mass market. I don't think it's good enough to go super mass market, but this passes a quality threshold for me that no previous headset for its price and standalone capabilities did. Then you have these first smart glasses that people actually buy. The previous Ray-Ban stories were completely flopped. It's going to be very, very fascinating. The story of this industry is going to be, how do these devices that are starting at these widely different positions start moving towards each other, and how does the market respond to that? Is it, capability and immersiveness, or is it kind of style and low weight and outdoor wearability and practicality? Or is it both? There is a dichotomy I'm setting up here that is inherently kind of biased. That's to suggesting there has to be a dichotomy. Is there, like the A-brush chart that has become the kind of typical VR download chart, the archetypal VR download chart, is this the future of both? Is it what we always talk about on this show, that you will wear your AR glasses or even smart glasses before out in the world and then come home, put them down on the dock or back in the case and pick up your VR mixed reality headset indoors? Will it be both? Is there a market for both? I think there is. Ian thinks there is, but the question is more whether there is and how long it takes based on current technological advancement until there is. Yeah, and Steve Farr's bringing up a good point. Meta probably don't expect tens of millions or millions of sales of these first display glasses, right? They are probably just an experiment, getting something out in the market, being the first of the big tech companies to do it, especially with the EMG wristband. And yeah, maybe they don't have those big expectations. I think another one I keep forgetting to point out here is that according to Bloomberg, the next glasses from the EssilorLuxottica and Meta partnership will be the Oakley Sphera glasses. So not the Oakley Houston ones that just came out. That's these that are basically just Ray-Ban Meta Pro, right? Longer battery life, higher resolution capture. But according to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, they are working on a Sphera version. So I'm bringing up the regular non-smart Sphera. This is not an image of a future product. This is the regular non-smart Oakley Sphera. And the idea would be that it would have a camera in the center, so you can get centered first-person footage of cycling, skiing, etc. And yeah, so we'll probably see a bunch of different brands from EssilorLuxottica arrive as smart glasses. Really enjoy everyone's comments today. Unfortunately, I am out of time now as well, as Ian was before. I think Ian's probably fully back tomorrow. This was his actual return. He wanted to return live with you all. So I hope that was great at the start of the show. Thanks so much, everyone. Please comment under the video if you want your comment to be more readily and likely seen and responded to. To be frank, please comment under the article about the topic, and that I get a notification directly immediately for that, and I can come and respond to that in a more easy way than getting onto YouTube. So I see a lot of views here. Really interesting discussion in the comments. I'd love to read more about your thoughts if you did have detailed thoughts in our comments below, in the comments on our article. Thanks so much, everyone. It's good to be back in our regular format. We will see you in the future.